Hello and welcome to the Bond Revisited podcast with me, Tom.
And me, Joe.
The podcast where we rewatch the Bond films one by one, discuss them, and then rank them alongside the other Bond films to build our own definitive list for the Bond franchise. You are listening to episode 4, where we'll be revisiting the film Thunderball. Now this is like a really interesting one, I feel like. Not that the other ones haven't been interesting, but the other ones are like classic Bond films. Regardless what you think of Dr. No and we'll say Goldfinger in your case, Joe, they're considered classics. But this one is really interesting because it's both like the peak Sean Connery hype, I guess you could say, in the 60s, but it's also the one that like no one ever talks about that much. It's just that big film that did well, that came over Goldfinger, and I feel like the general consensus of this film is that this was kind of maybe not the beginning of the end, but where things kind of took a turn.
It's interesting because something I read preparing for this podcast that I must have read before but forgot is that this film, Thunderball, earned more money than what the next 5 Bond films following it did.
Yeah. And
so you're right. Like this is in terms of popularity in the 60s, peak Bond, peak Sean Connery in his sort of Hollywood stardom as Bond. And yeah, after Goldfinger, it's sort of like people often just skip straight to You Only Live Twice because that's obviously the one with Blofeld and the big sets, and then you move on and you get George Lazenby. And Thunderball is sort of in that weird spot in the middle where it made a ton of money. It's got all the elements of Bond films in it. Like by this point, they had got the template down, and yet it just sort of seems a little bit wish-washy in the middle.
I see what you did there with wish-washy. I appreciate that.
Did I?
Water puns.
I am funny without even realising.
It's just so talented, this guy.
I'm
I can't
so
believe it.
talented, honestly. Wish-washy, yes, lots of water, as we will discuss. My goodness, so much water.
But again, it's one that can be easy to forget. But if you look at the list of every Bond film and their gross, if you then sort them by inflation, so they're all on level playing field, Thunderball is the second best performing James Bond film of all time.
Mad.
Number 1 is Skyfall, and number 3 is Goldfinger. But I believe even so, like in terms of tickets sold, I think I read that in the US, in America, this is still number 1. This was still the biggest Bond film. But we've got to the point where in the 60s, it was the biggest film, of that decade, arguably, and the biggest Bond film, to just being like, yeah, the one with the water, I think, maybe Tom Jones, and then you just move on. Like it's just been forgotten, despite being so big at the time.
It's the one that a lot of people, when they discuss it, is always to do with the legal issues with it and how it eventually spawned off Never Say Never Again.
Yes.
Always talk about Kevin McClory and the rights and this and that. And actually you hear very little compared to other Bond films about the actual plot and what was in the film itself, which is kind of strange.
So what did you remember about this film before you saw it?
Well, good question, Tom. As you may remember, I actually put this as my second worst Bond film.
You hated it. Couldn't stand it.
I remember really disliking this film, mainly because of... Well, I'm looking back at what I wrote for our intro episode, and I said that I disliked the villain. I said it had long, drawn-out underwater scenes, which weren't particularly good or impressive, and generally unmemorable. And I think now with having seen it again, I think some of that is a bit unfair. I definitely don't think it is the second worst Bond film. I'm becoming a whole new Bond fan with this podcast, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think... Yeah, generally, I had a negative opinion of this film going forward, like before this, going into the podcast.
Which I think a lot of people would probably agree with you on. Not so much the Goldfinger stuff, but you might have brought some people back with the Thunderball hating. You're a very complex man. But for me, I just didn't remember it. Like, this is one I watched. I've said multiple times at this point. I rewatched all the Sean Connery ones back in 2015, and this is one I actually don't remember. I didn't see it that long ago, but I remembered the other 3 roughly. But this one, I had just no memory of at all. I think the only thing I remembered was the thing that I liked about it is that you get to see other Double O agents and the scene where they're all sitting around the table.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember that scene, and I remember liking that scene, and I remember there was water, and I think that's about it. So it's not like negative. It's not that I was thinking, oh, this film was bad. I don't remember it, but I know it was bad. It was more just like nothing. Like, I just remember nothing about it. I couldn't say good or bad.
No, you did remember something else as well. Maybe
Okay.
not intentionally, but you remembered the sharks. Because you did say
yes.
about sharks.
Yes, I said sharks were in Octopussy, which they still might be. They still might be. We haven't got there yet. They still might be in that film.
There's sharks everywhere, but there is a fair amount of sharkage in this film.
This is the origin of the shark. I think that's the subtitle of this film.
Yeah, that's just lesser known subtitle. They dropped it for like home releases and things.
Yes. So let's get into it. We've got a lot of film to cover. So this is the longest Bond film, not across the board, but at the time they intentionally made this, and they even marketed this one as the biggest Bond ever. Like, they made a point. So this film is 2 hours and 10 minutes long, which is about 20 minutes or so longer than the other ones. So it's a long one. We got a lot to cover here. Hopefully still won't be as long as Goldfinger, but we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. I also will say this is the first Bond film watching that I have since read the book of.
Ooh.
So I think that helped a lot with some of the things we're going to discuss. But it's going to be interesting to actually see sort of direct comparisons now.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't read any of the books. I'll admit that, so I don't know. Even if you make it all up, I'll be like, interesting. Wow, really? A giant squid, you say? He fights one of those. Interesting.
He becomes best friends in the book with a guy called Joe.
Oh.
Yeah, and actually he's better than Bond.
Yeah, you're the original JB.
Yeah, that's
Joe
right.
Bond.
That's right.
Okay, so the film starts. We've got the other we got the classic James Bond walking across the screen. The circles are the same size. Can confirm. That's all good.
Phew.
I know, right? I was worried there. But he still has the hat. I think we predicted he would be hatless by this point, but he still very much has the hat. But the story there is some hat story going on this time, which I'm excited to get to.
Hat story.
We'll get there, Joe. We'll get there.
Good, because I forgot, clearly.
We'll get it's in my notes. It's highlighted. It's bold.
Yellow highlighter.
Hat revelations.
It's actually Sean Connery now.
Yes.
And not Bob Simmons for the first three. And really not much to say. Like, Sean Connery, I think it's very, very similar to the first three. It's got a little wobble, which I thought was a bit strange. Like, could they not have got a better shot of him doing like the kneeling down and shooting without the little wobble he has? But I guess he was just like, let's get this done. Let's move on. I'm a busy man.
Sean only does one take.
One take, Sean.
Yeah, especially when it comes to sharks.
Oh, yes. He hates those.
Hates them. So we go from that straight into another opening sequence, which this film immediately started on a bad note with me, because you open up on a church, you have a coffin which says JB written on it, which I think is supposed to be, oh, is that James Bond? Does that sound, is he dead? But they very quickly zoom out and show him, James Bond, up above looking down, talking to a French woman. Now, the reason why this started on a bad note is because I have a pet peeve with films where the talking is way too quiet and the action is way too loud. So I was sitting there trying to watch this film. I live on a decently busy road, so I had cars coming by and things like that. And because it's a funeral, those two were whispering to each other, but I could not, for the life of me, make out what they were saying. And I had to turn it up, and I rewound it about 3 times, and I eventually just said, you know what, forget it. I don't care. This isn't going to tie into the plot. I'm sick of Sean whispering, and then she's got a French accent, so it makes it harder to understand. I don't know. I roughly know what they said, but I was a bit annoyed. I was a little bit worried. Like, is the sound mixing just bad in this film? But then, of course, I realized, no, they're whispering, which is why it's so quiet.
No, I think the sound mixing is bad as well, though. Because you could be describing the exact, this is so weird, the exact same thing with me. The exact same thing. So, for the first time, this was me watching them on the Blu-rays. Nice. I previously watched them on Amazon, but they got rid of them. So I was back onto the Blu-ray box set. and I was watching it through the PS4, and I spent about the first 20 minutes trying to watch this film, troubleshooting, working out why my Blu-ray or why the PS4 was so much quieter. It was mad. And then I was like, this can't be right. Why are their voices so quiet? And then it will get onto the Bond song, the Thunderball song, and it'll be blasting. I think this is insane. Something must be wrong. No. Okay, good. It was just the film. Because you're right. I had to put on subtitles, and they stayed on for the whole film because of that first scene where I just couldn't understand what they were saying. It was really annoying.
Yeah, because the problem with it as well, so I didn't turn on subtitles, I just kind of avoided it, and then once you get to them being outside of the funeral, then it becomes a little bit better, and then they start talking, and I didn't have any other problems later on. I was able to turn down the volume and it was okay, because I've been watching the same Blu-ray set, so I know the other three were totally fine. I had no problems with the sound mixing, but this one straight away starts with the whispering. But they explain a lot. If it was just a case of like, oh, this is sad, it's like, oh yeah, very sad. Do you want to go outside? Yeah, okay. If it was like very basic dialogue, you would get
write a Bond film, Tom.
It's in the works. Of course, people are interested. But yeah, like, so if it was very basic dialogue, you wouldn't mind. But they explain a lot of plot here, and it's only plot that's relevant to this opening sequence. And I think roughly what they're saying is that, no, it's not me in the coffin. James Bond has to be like, no, that's not me. Even though she's like, I know, right? That's the next film. We'll get to it.
But it says JB. It must be.
It's got to be. Who else would it be? But yeah, so he just explains to her, like, she says, oh, it's the same initial as you. He says, no, it's my partner, Jeff Brugger. I wrote Brugger. I don't think that's the name, but it was interesting because ahead of this podcast, I was like, right, I should probably find out the details of this. Went to the Wikipedia page. It skips this section in part of the plot summary. Like, it does not explain this opening sequence at all. It just gets straight into the film itself. So that's how much people care about the storyline of this beginning bit. But it's a man called Jeff whatever, and he killed two of Bond's colleagues, who they don't really go into who they are, I don't think. And he's there to get revenge or something like that. I think that's the gist of it.
Well, it is slightly related to the main story. In I thought it was a Spectre agent, the guy.
Probably. I mean, that would make sense, right?
Yeah, I wrote down... So you got the first name, which is Jeff, clearly.
Yeah.
I got the last name, which is Bouvard.
Bouvard, right.
Bouvard. So there's your JB for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So yeah, this guy killed two 00 agents, I guess, and now Bond wants revenge. So he's watching his funeral and knowing that something is up, I'm guessing, with the French lady. It's very, like you say, it's a lot of explanation crammed into about 3 lines of very quiet dialogue, and then suddenly it's just moved on. And like, oh, okay, then I'll just go with it.
Yeah, like, I don't think you're supposed to get what happened. Like, if you were in a cinema and it was like bam, 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 bang, the shot, and then it cut to this, you just probably wouldn't pick up on it at all. So then they cut outside, they leave. And this was, I didn't really understand what was happening here. I guess Bond went to the funeral to chase down another Spectre agent. And from the church, they see a black car that drives away. It's a woman who was grieving at the funeral, and it pulls up to a big mansion. She gets into her mansion. She sees a man in the red chair, and it's Bond. I don't understand how that works, but you know. I think weren't we saying before in the last film about the superhero stuff, how Guy Hamilton didn't want Bond to seem like a superhero. And then straight away with this film, now that Terrence Young is back, I feel like we had a teleporting James Bond in the first 2 minutes of the film.
Yes, he teleported and knew exactly where to position the jetpack for later on in the scene. But yeah, so he saw the widow. This is the whole, and this is the only thing I can go off, is that he saw that she opened the car door herself, and that was enough to give it away. Or maybe he'd just seen through the veil as well. I don't know. It is a very strange pre-title sequence.
It happens very quick, and there's a lot of details that you can just miss. But you're right, I don't know how Bond kind of knew. You're just supposed to, I think, turn off your brain, and it's just a case of Bond's there at a funeral, and he thinks there's a bad guy, he follows the bad guy into the house, and then they have a big fight. Which is why I didn't know if it was Spectre or not. It would make sense that it was Spectre, especially with how this film goes, but it's like, it really doesn't matter to anything that happens in the film, unless... Oh, actually, maybe it does. Because in a later part of the film, during the scene where it's the big Spectre meeting with Blofeld at the head, he says, Spectre number 6 has been killed.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? When did that happen? Like, is that something from the book? I was very confused what he was talking about. But maybe this is what he was talking about. Maybe Bond killed Spectre agent number 6 in this scene.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, that's exciting.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't matter, but I didn't put that together until just now.
Yeah, I will say so. Yeah, Bond's in the chair waiting, teleporting Bond somehow got there before the car, and then oh no, it's not the wife or the widow, it's a man dressed up, and it's the guy that was supposed to be dead. Crazy, and then you get. I mean, to be fair. It's quite a good little thing. It's quite funny, you know, Bond just going up, punching her straight in the face. It's like a whoa, what moment? And then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's quite funny. I'm not saying punching women is funny, but you know, that setup was quite good. But then I would forgive this whole kind of general crappiness if it was a good fight scene and everything. But it really is not. I don't know what you felt, but I just thought this fight scene was really janky. Really weirdly edited and cut together and had no flow at all. There's very strange sort of like almost match cuts where it's meant to be like one full thing and you can tell there's a cut in there as they're just about to throw a punch or something like that in between all of the furniture throwing. And it really just looks kind of sloppy for being 4 films in and having, you know, big budget cinema blockbuster. It looks bad.
I did notice the exact same thing. So we haven't seen issues like this in any of the previous films, and Terrence Young is back, so you think he'll be on top of it. But this film in general, with its scenes, there's a lot more cuts and edits in general. But there's nothing like what we see in this scene where it doesn't feel like one cohesive fight where it's like Bond throws a chair, which he does, I think, and then he blocks it, and then the guy, as part of blocking it, then tackles Bond. It's like all this separated moves that happen. Like, here's a move of the guy tackling Bond, and then it just cuts to Bond like judo chopping in the back or something. Like, it's like none of it really makes sense.
No.
And yeah, I totally noticed it. Like, it was not subtle. If anyone has ever edited anything ever, you could just see that there were so many continuity errors to the point where like you just can't count them all because none of the scenes or none of these cuts actually tied into each other. There was kind of no effort to make it flow as one cohesive fight.
Yeah, it was a really, really clumsy start to the film for what's meant to be the big opening following Goldfinger. We had pretty much every... As we were saying, it was like a mini Bond film for that one. We had every single bit of a Bond thing, explosions, women, fight. This one, it just didn't have anywhere near the same quality. And I'm not even saying the Goldfinger one was very good, but this one's just really quite bad. Also just what it leads on to, which I think is what a lot of people think of when they think of Thunderball, which is the jetpack. I don't know if it's just because jetpacks now are just, we just know what jetpacks are. Maybe
we all have
are,
one. Yeah,
we all got one in the garage. You know, you used it once and then you got bored with it.
Yeah.
But maybe jetpacks were a cool new thing in 1965, maybe. But it wasn't quite the show-stopping end to the pre-title sequence that I was hoping it would be. And I think partly something to do with that is just because people look really silly with jetpacks. I don't know. I just thought like the way that your legs dangle in a jetpack. There's a shot of Bond flying away, and it just looks so, to me, just so silly with the little legs going wee in the sky. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on jetpacks, but I just thought it was a bit lame.
Well, I can see where you're coming from. So basically, what happens is Bond beats the guy, breaks his neck, and then there's a load of people trying to break into the room at the same time. Bond leaves, they're chasing him, and then he goes to the roof of this mansion, and then just finds a jetpack, which I think is implied it's his.
Oh, yeah.
I think, yeah, it's implied that he's planted it there, gets on the jetpack, and then kind of flies off. And it made me laugh, and sometimes that's enough. Like, I was like, this is really silly, but does that make it good? I don't know, but I think I'm enjoying this. But it's so brief as well. It's not a big scene with the jetpack. He literally just, from the mansion roof, gets in it, and then just flies over to his car, which is not that far away. And I'm assuming the reason is because this is a real jetpack. Like, this is a jetpack that did function, and it wasn't any movie magic or anything like that. During this time, there was a functioning jetpack that you could get. I was reading about this afterwards, and it was used in like the Super Bowl as well and things like that. Like, there are other cases of people using this jetpack, and I believe they just thought like, jetpack, okay, Bond should use a jetpack. So it's kind of a little bit forced in there, but you're right about the legs, but it got to the point where it was so silly I couldn't help but enjoy it.
It was silly, and I was laughing at it too, if you couldn't tell. But I don't know, I think why I don't like that is because it clearly wasn't meant to be silly. Or maybe it was, but to me it was meant to look cool. And you're right, it lasts 5 seconds as he goes down to the ground and into the Aston. And yeah, it's just funny how that is such a, I think there's like, toys and everything was related to the jetpack for this film. And it's just like, that's it. And, I think you're right. I think it was a very forced thing in there. Just like, this is this cool piece of tech. Let's just get it in there at the beginning and then get on with it.
Yeah, like they haven't quite figured these out yet. The From Russia with Love is looking like a great accident in terms of that title sequence or opening sequence being great. These ones, this template is very similar to what we saw in Goldfinger, but ultimately it's like, it's a short mini story with Bond where he just does some cool Bond things, and then that's your lot, and that's that wrapped up. They haven't quite figured this one out. And this one kind of has different problems from Goldfinger, but to me it felt very similar to Goldfinger, where it's like, okay, fine, if you're going to do a standalone Bond film, just make sure it's like really solid and memorable. And this one kind of is, I guess, a little bit more memorable than Goldfinger, but still nothing nothing you're thinking about after the film is done. Or I wasn't anyway. Memorable
for the wrong reasons, probably.
Yes. So it ends with them getting the Aston Martin. He meets up with the French woman. He then... Well, it's the Aston Martin from Goldfinger, so a nice little bit of continuity. He then activates the bullet shield, which blocks the bullets. It turns out he's got some foam installed. I don't think that's from Goldfinger. I think this is new for this film, the foam.
The foam?
Yeah.
I thought that was water. What, coming out the back?
Well, foamy water. It was quite thick for water, right?
Yeah, well, whatever it was, some liquid, being shot out the back. I think that is new. You're right.
So Q's sorted him out with some water foam, which is very nice of him. And then that transitions into the credits sequence, which I really appreciated the fact that there was such a strong tie. I want to say that's the first time it's happened, and it's become a Bond staple ever since. They usually do try and make a smoother transition into the opening scene into the credits one, but this is one where it's very direct, where the water is spraying on the screen, and then that kind of transforms into this water background, which forms the basis of this credit sequence.
Yeah, I was actually quite impressed by that, seeing it for the first time, because it is. You're right. It's quite smoothly done for what is a film that has a lot of very unsmooth cuts and things like that. There's like, okay, nice, and how it goes all blue, and then you get onto the, as you say, the title sequence. Good stuff. So speaking of the title sequence, we have Tom Jones, Thunderball. I'm very curious to hear your opinion on this Bond song. In fact, I'm gonna just leave you to answer before I say anything.
Oh, okay, fine. I don't really remember this song that well. It's not one I ever really kind of re-listened to, and it's not one that I hears a lot. And I actually couldn't remember how it went at all before rewatching this. And rewatching it, I was actually quite surprised. Like, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. It's still kind of probably middle of the pack. But I was like, Tom Jones doesn't sound as stupid as I remember him sounding. Because in my head, when you say Tom Jones, I think like Sex Bomb and how silly that kind of stuff is, and
Oh, I
how
love that song.
yeah, and then how like yeah,
Said no one.
no, and just how exaggerated his voice is. He's a bit of a caricature. Maybe that's the wrong word, but like in my head, I have a very exaggerated version of Tom Jones's voice in my head because of how kind of iconic his voice is. And this one wasn't that, and I really like the backing track as well. I think the actual music itself is really fantastic. So overall, I actually really enjoyed it. The lyrics are corny, like really corny, because they're just directly singing about how cool James Bond is, which is not stuff that I kind of get into. It's like, at least try and mask it. But I was pleasantly surprised. I actually think it's a solid song.
Okay. Well, that's good, because I get the impression this isn't necessarily related to Thunderball per se, but it's related to Tom Jones.
Good.
And I just get the idea that a lot of people do not like Tom Jones. I don't know what it is about him. I think a lot of people find him creepy. Maybe because of the whole sex bomb stuff, and but I often find, that they might not even, they might not mind the song, but because they don't like Tom Jones so much, it's like no, I'm not going to listen to it. I think I agree with you in that I actually quite like it. I don't think it's compared to Goldfinger. This one I think I probably would listen to more, but mainly because, as you say, I actually like the sort of melody of it more. The trumpets or whatever they are, some sort of brass or I think that sounds really good to me. It is a little bit repetitive, but then I guess that is just the nature of some Bond songs, and. Yeah, I would say it's actually quite good. I know a lot of people talk about Tom Jones and they say about, oh, did you know he passed out when he did the final note? So I don't really care. Like, great, good for him. Good for him. Like, the final note, it doesn't go on for a very long time, whatever. But song-wise, I think it's quite good. It is very similar to Goldfinger, I think.
Yeah, they were very intentionally trying to build off that success, you can tell. But it's one of those where I can disconnect it in my mind, like when you compare it to Goldfinger, it doesn't kind of compare in terms of being a classic Bond theme. But I think when you kind of take it at its own merits, it's still pretty solid. And I might say this song reflects how I feel about the film in general, where it's like kind of unmemorable and it doesn't have a big hook, this song, but still actually surprisingly solid. But maybe I'm giving too much away.
Well, another thing related to the music, just before we get into the actual film, because you do hear it throughout the film as well, just to comment on, is about the whole unused theme song. I think there's a couple, actually. I think Johnny Cash even tried to do one for this film. But the one that you hear instrumentally quite a lot is Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which I really like. I actually really like this as a song, as a Bond song, unused as it may be. I think it was originally meant to be sung by Shirley Bassey. Kind of goes to show about the Goldfinger connection. But they couldn't get her, so it was then sung by Dionne Warwick. And it's kind of similar to later on with Tomorrow Never Dies, where the Surrender song by K.D. Lang was never actually used as the main one, but you can still hear it throughout the score. And so, I just kind of like what we said with Goldfinger. The music is really good for this film. And I think even for this one, both songs, the one that they actually went with and the one that's just heard instrumentally, both really work well. But anyway, the actual title sequence, I put down that this is sort of the first instance of the proper Bond women silhouette that has become such a cliche now for this. We see lots of silhouetted women swimming against blue and water backgrounds and then red every now and then. And I actually thought it was probably one of the worst so far, sadly.
Oh, okay.
As I say, it has that iconic silhouette thing, which we then see so many times later on. But I don't know, it just didn't really do much of that premise of the silhouettes. And I think it just got a little bit repetitive by the end.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And it's because I somewhat retroactively really enjoyed it because this film is all about water, as we've already kind of said, is what you remember about it. So I actually really appreciate how heavy they go on with the water theme for this opening sequence. And to be honest, I've enjoyed every single one so far. The Doctor No one's weird, but I like how From Russia with Love heavily ties to the film. I like how Goldfinger had the golden statue women that heavily ties into the film. So I like that they went with the water theme, even if it's, like you say, a bit repetitive. And that is one thing I would kind of say against it. There's no progression there, where, say, in Goldfinger, with the gold statues, it's a lot of footage from the film and From Russia with Love and things like that. And the ending of it is just a lot of fire. So there's like a clear progression there. This one doesn't go beyond here's women singing or swimming and here's a diver with a harpoon gun going across. The color changes, which I like, and I think going from blue to red is a really good choice, especially for what happens in the film. But yeah, the last 30 seconds is pretty much the same as the first 30 seconds, and they kind of needed to add a little bit something to tie it all together. But I still really enjoyed the visuals and was actually quite impressed that they were doing this type of theme so early on, because each of these films, Thunderball was released a year after Goldfinger. This is still a yearly franchise. I think it's You Only Live Twice where we have the 2-year gap. So yeah. I was just kind of impressed by the progression of these.
Yeah. I think they're all very, very similar. They're all very, very similar. It's not until I think technology kind of advances where they could start doing slightly different things, maybe. Because I think it's the same guy that did them all, or maybe not actually. I might be getting that wrong. But for now, it is quite simple. But hey, that might be your cup of tea.
It is. It is my cup of tea.
Lovely.
I like it. So at the very end, it also comes up, because it's the credits, that Terence Young is back for this film. So we kind of questioned about Guy Hamilton and the Terence Young stuff, so I looked it up in between, and Terence Young did 3 Bond films, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and this one, but this was his final film, and Guy Hamilton did actually do more overall, so he is going to come back. But he did 4 in total, where Terence Young only did the 3.
Oh, right. Oh, I didn't know that was his last one, this one.
Yeah, so it gives it a little bit of a different feel, and we'll get into it, I guess, as we go, but this didn't feel the same as the first 2. So it's actually, if you told me this was not Terence Young, it was a new director, I actually might have believed you, because it doesn't feel like the other 2, but that might be for reasons that aren't related to him and the director, but this does feel like a different film from those first 2. I
think you're right, and I think that's probably related to... Again, it's coming up because it always does about Thunderball, the whole Kevin McClory thing. I think he had a lot of sway with this. That was kind of one of the things they gave him to sort of settle this suit is, okay, you become the sole producer and obviously have a lot of input on this film. So maybe it was a bit of just too many cooks with this and not having one unified theme from one director.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that because the budget, I think, doubled again, right? It's even higher than what it was for Goldfinger.
Yeah.
So after the title sequence, we then go to Paris and we see a man parking up with a eye patch. And my first thought was, whoa, Blofeld, they're just going to show him like that? Which I was very quickly corrected on by the film. But I genuinely thought that was Blofeld to begin with.
I will say, on that shot that you're talking about, the guy parking his car and coming out, did that really remind you of the shot from No Time to Die? Or am I just seeing things?
I haven't seen No Time to Die since it came out in the cinema, so...
Oh, okay.
And that was a very long film.
Or just the poster that they showed of No Time to Die quite a lot, of the Aston Martin V8, I think it is. I don't know. It was something about the angle of that camera. I just thought, oh, is this what they were referencing in No Time to Die? Probably not. But I
think not, because they wouldn't reference, I think, Largo parking up to Bond. That seems like an odd choice, a bold choice even.
But then also kind of going back to the whole general sloppiness of some of the editing, did you notice that the aspect ratio just completely changed? It was just way off this first shot.
No, I didn't.
I don't think it happened again, but it's just kind of weird that it would even have this problem where, it was in a slightly... can't think of the term for it now, but with the black bars on the side as well.
Letterbox, is that? Or that's the other way around? Yeah,
so it was letterboxed on the sides.
Oh.
And then he goes through into the building and it goes back to normal. I just don't know what was going on.
Just used the wrong cameras that day, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Whoops.
Maybe it's just stock footage or something. I don't know. Maybe it's all reprojection.
You see that guy in so many films. It's like the Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, exactly. You see the eye patch, you're like, oh yeah, it's him.
Oh yeah.
So this guy goes into, I actually don't remember where he goes into, but he goes into a normal business, goes into the back, goes to, I can't remember, like a bookcase or something like that. I don't think it is a bookcase. I don't quite remember. But basically he goes and finds a secret door, and behind this door is a large silver room with a lot of very important looking people sitting around. And here we have, when it comes to Thunderball, there's a lot of things you can say about it, but iconic is not one of them. So I found it was quite interesting that this had such an iconic Bond scene. And I would only assume that this type of scene happens in the later films as well, because this is one-to-one, what people parody. All the businessmen around the table. You got Blofeld at the top being hidden, stroking the cat, saying, "How's our evil schemes going?" And then all of them saying, "We've made all this money." Number one, he's like, "Good." Number two, "Good." And it's straight up that scene, and the first time we see it as well.
That is a great Blofeld impression.
Oh, thank you.
You nailed that. I will say on Blofeld's voice, this is just a small thing. I was convinced. I was like, "Oh, this is a much better Blofeld voice now. It's much creepier and a bit lighter and wispier." I said it sounded like Santa Claus last time in From Russia with Love. It's the same guy. It's the same guy doing the voice. I don't know what happened, but to me they sound completely different, and I like this one a lot more.
I don't know. I thought it sounded the same. I didn't think about it too much, but I did assume it was the same guy.
Huh. I think I might just be going a little bit crazy then, but to me it just sounded really, really different. But it was, still the same guy dubbing it. But you're right though, I actually can't think of if this. I mean, you're probably right in that very similar scenes come up, but I can't think of another film where it has such a big, as you say, the cliche guy at the head of the table, and then someone says something, and then he's getting fried or dropped into a pit or something. So it is funny that this is one of the things that really just stuck in people's minds. But I think that is something to be said about the quality of the. I think altogether this seems really good. Mainly, I really like the set. Like we said before, sets are getting better and better, more and more money. Definitely true of this one straight away. I really love the design of the Spectre headquarters, the table, and it's very kind of angular and very modern looking, just like coming in from Paris where it's all, old buildings, everything. I loved it. I really, really liked the start of this with Spectre's boardroom.
Yeah, what was the silver, white, and black? I guess was everything, wasn't it? Like even when they bring the world map, it was just like a black and white kind of map, or maybe like a silver and black. So yeah, everything has that almost clean look, which I feel like, I don't know if this started it, but having something be super clean almost feels evil. I can't explain
sterile.
that. Yeah, sterile. Yeah, like clean to a fault. Like they're not, I guess it's because they're not human is the implication, right? Where humans make a bit of mess and are a little bit more messy. But with this being so precise, it feels very robotic in a way that hammers in the themes of them being evil. And the fact that they're all in suits as well, like these are people of all nationality in tuxes, basically, kind of really hammers that home of everyone being very clean and proper and rich and, well, evil.
Yeah, all very ordered, structured. This person talks and this person talks and this, but yeah, it's a great scene. Don't try and tell me what's actually discussed in the scene though, because that's where I sort of, that's where I struggle with actually listening to what's being said and trying to keep up with plot.
So roughly, I think he says it's a shame that number 6 has been killed, which I now believe was the man in the dress, I think. And then he says, "Let's have a little finance update, everybody. Let's go around the table." It's like a Zoom call, I guess. Everyone gets a turn. And then someone's like, "We made all this money. We made all this money." And someone else, I think it's an Englishman, I want to say, is like, "We made this money." And he's like, "It's a little bit low. You're not skimming off the top there, are you?" And he's like, "No, not me, governor. Like, I wouldn't do that." And then he's like, "Well, somebody has, and I'm going to kill him." And then I think he presses the button, I want to say. Yeah. I don't think the cat does it.
I would love that. I would love to see that.
Yeah. Or he just like puts the cat on it, and there we go.
Dangles a little toy above the
Yeah.
button, so the cat like
Little
tries to
treat
hit it.
on the button. So then he hits a button and a random person dies. You don't know why. He gets electrocuted and is killed. They don't really explain why. I guess he's the one stealing money, but they don't really explain how that works. You're not meant to think about it too much, I don't think.
Yeah, I think he was meant to be working with the guy that you think, oh, he's in for it now. He's the one sweating, and the guy next to him who's just like, not reacting at all. Oh, it was actually him all along. Crazy.
But it does make me kind of think that maybe it was random, because we had this From Russia with Love, which I tried to explain away when they give number 5 the old poison knife shoe instead of number 3. So I guess it's kind of referencing that and more of that. Like he just will kill a random person just to do it. But I thought I had an explanation for that one. But this one, I guess not so much, apart from the fact that I guess he was crooked. You just don't even know who that guy is.
Yeah, I guess so. What I did like with that little bit is for the pirate character, who we don't really know yet, the eye patch one. It cuts to him and there's just no reaction from him. He's just there with his bit of paper, looking through his notes, and it's a very, very simple little scene to do, where it just kind of shows, as you say, they're not meant to be so inhuman. They just don't care that this guy's getting electrocuted right in front of them and dropped down a pit. It's just nothing to him. Very cold, but really, really good. I like that.
Yeah, and they have said his name. I think they say straight away Mr. Largo, I think. Because when he parks up the car, he's like, Mr. Largo's here. Excellent. So they do give you his name, but also Blofeld says this is number 2. So from anyone who's watched From Russia with Love recently, which happens to be us, you can straight away say, well, we know number 1 and we know number 3 and who number 3 was and who number 5 was, but this guy's number 2. This guy's like second in the organization, so it gives him a little bit more weight straight away, which I thought was nice. And I just appreciate these scenes, and I don't know if it's because I enjoyed From Russia with Love so much that now I just like these scenes, but I just really like the Spectre scenes where you see a little bit more into their organization, you see into their structure, how they work. I just think that's cool, and I just think it's a really neat way to start the film, that you are straight away seeing who will end up being the villain, and you see a little bit more about Blofeld and how Spectre works as a organization.
The inner workings of an evil organization. What do they actually do? How do they run their business meetings? One thing that I caught that I haven't actually looked up, so I could be completely wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I heard it, was when they're giving all their announcements of how, income wise, how they've generated money, the British guy says about a train robbery and how they're getting money from that. And I'm pretty sure that there actually wasn't that the Great Train Robbery happened in the 60s? Wasn't that a real thing that happened? As I say, I might need to Google this, but I'm pretty sure that was an actual robbery that happened. And so it's kind of similar to in Dr. No, when there was the painting that was actually stolen at the time. I like how they have these little things that kind of cement Spectre into the real world and kind of give them as the origin of all of these crimes. I just think it's, as you say, kind of a neat little insight into the evil organization.
Yeah, it's cool. You couldn't do it nowadays. Like, if Daniel Craig's Bond, that era did that. I'm not even going to name any examples. I think that's like, I just don't think you could do it nowadays, I guess. Like, stealing a painting from Dr. No, fair enough, and a train robbery back in the day, but yeah, I think with how things have gone in the world the last 10 years, it's probably smart they didn't do that. But you're right, in terms of this film in the 60s, it's neat to ground it in that time and these crimes that have happened. Yeah,
I think you're right. Doing it now, I think would just be a bit too bleak. I think we're all depressed enough. We don't need to see more reasons for why everything's going wrong in the world.
No. So at the end of the scene, Blofeld then says, "Number 2, give us your plan. You've got a plan, right?" And he says, "We are going to demand a ransom of $280 million, and we have sent an agent to a health clinic." Now, that's all you get. Like, I was so ready there with my notes to be like, right, let's write this down. We're going to get the plan. But no, you get a very brief start of this plan that they're going to demand some sort of ransom, so they're up to something, and then it goes on to the next scene, which is very noteworthy because it wasn't a fade. It was a swipe. They're swiping.
There is a lot of swipes in this film.
Yeah, like Doctor No was all fades, and this one is all swipes, and I don't know why. I don't know why change it. I didn't mind the fade. I don't know why they couldn't do both. But this is the first time we see the swipe, and like you say, there's a lot of swipes as transitions in this film.
Terrence Young is a very direct man. He's going to have one thing and he's going to stick to it. First it was fades, now it's the swipes.
It's like one of those where like, what wallpaper do you want? Or planning a wedding or something, like, what appetizer do you want? And Terrence Young will be like, that one. Everyone will be eating the same. There'll be no options. I have picked it and it shall be so.
And you will like it.
Yes. Or not, I don't care.
This is my last one. I don't care anymore.
I'm retiring. This is going to make me a lot of money. So, yes, we swipe to the next scene where we see Bond. We get Bond kind of straight away. He's getting a massage, and a man approaches him who looks... He seems like he's kind of like a British agent. Like, they don't say he's an agent, but the fact that Mr. Largo is like, we've sent an agent there. And then there's like this British man, and Bond sees a very weird red mark on him. I got a little bit confused by this whole sequence in the health clinic. But I did kind of notice that I feel like they intentionally made this guy seem like a alternate universe version of Bond.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really pick up on that, but I think that's because, as you say, this whole health clinic scene moves at a mile a minute in terms of plot. So I think I was just too busy trying to keep up with it. Even though I'd read the book and knew what the plot was, I seeing it in film form is a whole different ballpark.
Yeah, like there's a lot of details here. And to be fair, you don't actually need to know a lot of them, because after a third of the way into the film, everything that happens here is not very relevant. Like it kind of gets pushed to the side once the proper plot kicks in, but you get a lot of stuff that happens here. So I guess I'll try and get through it quite quick because it's not that important.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. So Bond is, I think, coincidentally at the same health clinic as this Spectre agent. I think it's a coincidence.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, so why... I don't know. It's so weird that that's the case. So weird. So he's getting massage. He sees a symbol on the arm thinking that's not right. Calls Moneypenny, so she now knows about the symbol. And I think she said something about the symbol. But again, we know he's a bad guy. It doesn't matter where the symbol's from. That's a bad guy. And then there's a little bit of flirting on the phone. Classic. We can all enjoy that. And then there's a man called Count Lippe. Mm-hmm. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah. And
Bond searches his room, and I don't know why. I'm struggling.
Wait, now I'm lost again. When he goes in the room, right?
So he must search the room because of something Moneypenny said about the symbol.
Yes,
but I don't know why.
Because he's a Tong. I remember the word Tong, or something like that.
So some sort of related to that. I guess Bond knows something is up, so searches the room. As he's searching the room, which, by the way, I put great music so far. You've already said it's great music, but I think it's worth repeating. This film has fantastic music. It's a fantastic soundtrack. And just in these scenes, these quieter scenes, like they both do the action scenes well, but I think it's the quieter scenes where you really feel it. And we have the scene of Bond searching a room, but the music's just great. Like, it's just really, really on point.
This is the same music that's used later on when he's kind of searching around the clinic at night, right? Is that... Because I put that for that scene, and it's a similar scene where it is, it's quiet, sneaking around music, and it has that sort of very like plodding but sneaky. Yeah, it's great. I love the music.
Yeah, for sure. So as he's looking around, we get a bit of a spy scene where he's just kind of looking for something. We see a man in bandages. So Bond hides because the man in bandages then comes in and takes a look in. He doesn't see Bond. He then leaves the room, the man in the bandages, and then Bond leaves the room, and then the man with the bandages then sees Bond leave the room. It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
And also, Bond eats a grape. I don't know. He
loves grapes. Yeah, that's a strange little bit, but the only reason I remember that is because it's referenced again in Die Another Day.
Oh yeah, of course it would be, wouldn't it?
Bond loves grapes. It's confirmed.
Yeah. But yeah, it's completely out of nowhere. There's just a bowl of grapes, so he just eats ones. I think it's meant to be that he's being nonchalant, I suppose, but it was a bit weird that he kind of intentionally went out of his way to have a grape.
He's a cheeky chappy, isn't he, Bond?
He's a very cheeky chappy. So then Bond returns to the woman who was giving him a massage from before, who's an attractive blonde, of course. That's just part of the course. Mm-hmm. And then we have another one of these scenes, unfortunately, where she's not that into him. I'm skipping ahead a little bit because we've got we actually do have another scene, but basically he forces himself, be like, go on, love, and she's just like, actually no, and actually seems quite unhappy about the situation. So her solution is that I'm going to put you on the rack.
The rack.
Yes. And because it's a health clinic, they have all these kind of wacky things. So Joe, what is the rack?
I was going to ask you the same thing. I put down, is that a real machine?
It must be.
I can understand that there is a machine that would do something like that, where it stretches your back, right? Because people get very tense in their back. That makes sense. Does it have to move that way? Does it have to have that motion? It's just, this is one of those scenes. Again, it's like you're laughing at it, but should I be laughing? Is this meant to be dramatic? It just looks ridiculous seeing Bond on this machine, and then where it eventually leads to where he's strapped in, and she's like, you think about what you've done, trying to do that to me, and walks off, and so there he is having his spine stretched when, oh no, the man with he's wearing a ring, like the Spectre ring, isn't he?
Yeah, you see his hand.
Yeah, we see his hand with a ring on it. It turns the crank up or whatever it is to turn the speed up on this machine, and it goes into some wild, crazy fast mode, which causes pain and lots of grimacing from Bond. This is what I mean. So it's one of these things where they've like fast forwarded the footage to make it look more dramatic, but when it's the sort of motion where he's lying on his front and his arms stretched out and it's sort of rocking back and forth, it just looks dumb. It just looks dumb. And when it goes even faster, it's even worse. It's like a chipmunk mode thing going on. Oh, I don't know. If that's meant to be dramatic and tense, I did not feel any of that.
This is one of those where, looking back on this, because of how long this film is, I'm thinking, what can they cut? They could 100% cut this and it would make no difference to anything.
Absolutely.
At all you had to do was have Bond discover the guy in the bandages and then seduce the woman or whatever, and that was your lot. That would have done it. But for some reason they have this extra dramatic scene where Bond is stuck on this rack going backwards and forwards, and I like to think that Sean Connery wasn't acting here, because this is like the most panicked and like uncool Bond has been up to this point, and probably ever will be, because he's just generally like, oh god, no the rack. Like he's just like actually like shouting and screaming for help on this thing, but the thing that saves the scene is that we get some very good shots of sweaty Sean Connery. So
here we go.
A lot of zooms in on the faces, because it jumps a lot between all these different zoom ins and first person, and quite a few of those is a zoom in on Sean Connery face, and he is very sweaty. So I'm glad the budget is being put to good use.
Box ticked. So what you're saying is you wouldn't cut this at all, or maybe just have the close-ups of Sean, but nothing else.
Maybe this should be the title sequence. Maybe. Just have Thunderball play over this. That would have kept me happy.
Right, let's get editing this. I think we could do one of those sort of home edits and make a better version ourselves.
I love the idea of those lyrics about, oh, his James Bond is so cool. You don't know where it's going to strike. And it's just like, God, no, help. Thunderball.
Oh, I need to see that. Someone edit that, please. Yeah.
I mean, it has the motif of water on his face. It works.
Yeah. Wow, salt water as well. Wow.
Yeah, salty salt water.
Oh.
So yeah, I think you are meant to take this seriously, which is what makes it not great, actually. Because the music is so serious. I think if the music was less serious and there was some sort of comedic tone, but no, it's treated like a fight scene music, but it's just Sean Connery in a towel shaking backwards and forwards. But you have this very dramatic music, so I think it is meant to be taken seriously. I can't hate it because it's so dumb, but it is just dumb.
I did hate it before, but now that you've given me that idea for editing, now I like it. So now it can stay.
Yes. It gave us something we didn't know we needed.
Exactly.
So eventually, thanks to Sean Connery's screaming and shouting, the woman who put him in there eventually comes back and is like, "Oh no, what happened?" And I think Bond kind of says, "Hey, someone sabotaged me," but she was like, "No, that's dumb. It's my fault. And if anyone found out about this, they would fire me." So James Bond, being the cool character that he is, well, I suppose my silence could have a price. And then they both go into the steam room and she undresses and obviously they have a good time and make it even more steamy in that room.
I think we've had Bond schmoozing and ending up in a similar situation before. I think it's that whole thing about, well, you know, my silence has a price sort of thing. That's the thing that makes this really just ew. I really didn't like this bit, and I wrote down that we had more of the yes back. So more creepy yeses from Sean. I think what makes it worse is the whole. Well, I guess they were trying to make her a bit playful. The woman. Where she's like, "Oh no, 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 no," shaking her finger, sort of thing. But I don't know, just gross.
Yeah, I mean we've covered it quite well in the previous ones. Really, there's no difference to this one to the previous ones. It's just him being a bit forceful. She's clearly not into it, and then eventually it just flips on its head, and now she is, I guess. But the thing that bothers me about this, and it's actually something that we'll get to the Bond girl of this film later, and actually I think this makes me appreciate the Bond girl a lot more. And it's that Bond just has zero chemistry with some of these women. Like, it's not that they're getting on and he just goes a bit too far. They just I don't think they would be friends. Like, they're just, like, really cold and just not great towards each other. Like, he's sending all these flirty stuff and she's just so not interested. And it's like, there's nothing here. I get no chemistry between James Bond and this woman. But if there was just a little bit, you know, like what Moneypenny is and things like that, and some, you know, Bond women throughout the franchise, if there was just a little bit of chemistry between these two, that you felt something, you could at least excuse them kind of, you know, taking to that place so quickly and just having a little bit of fun. Like if it was just framed like, oh, it's just two adults having a little bit of fun because they get on and they both physically attracted to each other, whatever, they're adults, they can do what they want. But there's just nothing here. Sean Connery is not a charming man. He's just so off-putting with his yeses and stuff like that. And I think that's something that would fix this and make this feel so much better if Bond could just be more charismatic in some of these situations.
Yeah, blackmailing to sleep with a woman is not the most charismatic move. Gotta be honest. I think him and Sylvia had much better chemistry in the first film and a little bit of, you know, the beginning of the second one. You're right. There's just nothing there. There's nothing there, and the whole sort of taking advantage of the woman who, you know, her worried about her job. That's the element of this that I think is a bit different to others, and I just don't like at all.
No. And then this whole sequence wraps up with the Englishman that we saw before, who is kind of implied that is the one who sabotaged the rack, because you hear an English voice saying like, good luck with this or something like that, or have a nice trip or something. I don't know. Bond goes up to him in his steam pod, just puts a broom in there and traps him and then leaves. And I don't know if you ever see that guy again. I think that might be
you
it.
do? No, you
do.
But that's the thing. That's why I was convinced, that's him dead then. But no, he got out of that and he comes back. So,
all right,
very strange, very strange. So after that, we get on to a change of location and we see a man and a woman in bed. Doesn't sound so different, but it is, believe me, with different characters. And the guy is needing to leave for, well, we don't know yet, but he soon puts on a pilot's coat and you realize that he is a pilot. And this whole, I mean, I'm having trouble trying to explain this because there's a lot of names going on right now. So the evil guy in the clinic was his name was Angelo, and then we have Angel, who is
The
pilot in this
bandage
scene.
guy, right, is Angelo.
That's Angelo, is he?
Yeah. Well, I have it in my notes that the masseuse tells Bond that that's Mr. Angelo who's been in a car crash.
Oh, you're right. Lippe is the guy that's the other agent. You're right, Count Lippe. Yeah. So Angelo, Lippe. Now you have Angel. No, not Angel. You know what? Start this bit again because I cannot get this bit right.
Are you talking about the woman, right?
No, because there's
the woman in the bed.
3 men now. There's the Lippe, the real pilot, and then the fake one who had plastic surgery, right?
Yes.
And that's what I was getting confused at.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know what? I'll leave this to you because I can't explain it.
Right, so I did not put... You know me, I don't put names to people when I write this stuff down. So in my head, I roughly know what's going on, but to me it's just the pilot man and then the Spectre woman, as we find out. So basically the woman saying don't go, the pilot goes, he opens the door, and then he gets gassed, I believe, and that knocks him out. But he gets gassed by someone that looks exactly like him. In some very obvious rear projection, I guess, would be the technique they would have used.
It was very primitive, but I actually thought it was quite good.
Yeah, it was surprising. Like, you were surprised by it, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So a clone of himself, which I've referred to as clone throughout my notes, gasses him, knocks him out. I think they do actually kill him, but I don't think it was with the gas, unless it's implied they're using the gas from Goldfinger's scheme, but I think I'm stretching with that one.
I think it's the same gas he uses on the plane itself. So he does die, yeah.
Yeah. So they kill him, and then it turns out the woman is part of Spectre, and there's another man there as well, like another Spectre agent that I think we see later on.
I thought that was Count Lippe. Was it not?
Oh my god, this is so confusing. Like probably. I don't remember.
I really thought that was, because I was just surprised that he wasn't dead.
It makes sense that it would be, but I don't know.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is.
Okay,
because he comes back.
I believe you.
He comes back because he's putting the silencer on the gun later on in the scene. Right, okay.
Okay, yeah, so Lippe, the guy... Lippe, why not, is there. And this clone guy, the one who looks exactly like the pilot, he's talking about, I've been surgically altered to look like this guy. Hold on, I'm checking my notes again, because this is... If it wasn't for the names, I would have this all in my head. But in terms of who is who...
I've ruined it, but with names, haven't I? I should never have mentioned any names.
Because there's the woman who's Volpe. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. But that looks like that's how it's spelled.
Oh, Volpe?
Volpe. It's probably Volpe, right?
Yeah.
Because it's saying, okay. So then there's this clone. There's this others. They're all part of Spectre. The guy who is now looking like the pilot is part of Spectre. And in that scene, he's all like, I want more money. You're not giving me enough money for this case. So you don't actually... Part of this is that you're not supposed to know 100% what's going on, which is something that's quite cool about the beginning of the film, to be honest. Like, Spectre has this big scheme, and as things kind of play out, you get these little bits in terms of exactly what that is. So you just know that Spectre has a clone of a pilot, a NATO pilot, and this guy demands a little bit more money. They say, well, I think... whoever the other agent is says no. The woman says, yes, that's fine, but we'll give you this money as a down payment, and lets him leave. And then he goes over to this airfield and gets into this NATO place. Yeah.
I think what this comes down to, that's very evident by our struggle with recollecting the plot, is I like the idea of this. I like the idea of Spectre... Because the guy says 2 years of my life or something like that, all the training to try and do this mission, I need more money. And I like the idea that they've put so much thought into this plan, plastic surgery, getting down to the mannerisms of how he says, ciao and stuff like that. I love all that sort of stuff, but it's just so condensed and so rushed. And I do think you're right. We shouldn't need to know everything. There is something to be said about having a bit of mystery in the plot and going along with Bond or the good guys in learning about it. But I just think it's very I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a waste of what could be quite an interesting setup to an evil plan. You just suddenly see, oh right, okay, the plastic surgery is done, and now we're going to go straight onto the actual operation of it. I don't know. And then you end up with me sitting there thinking, what on earth is going on? Even though I did kind of know what to expect with this film because of the plot, and it is not that dissimilar to the book. But I just wish they'd have spent just a little bit more time with this section of the film and a little bit less time later on with some of the underwater scenes and make it a little bit more balanced. It just seems very unbalanced, this rush of plot at the beginning.
I mean, I suppose that's fair, but I just kind of take it as in, like, you're not meant to focus on this. And the important part of the film is once Spectre carries out this plot, that's what the film's really about. And it's just trying to get to that point. Whether that's a good or bad thing, I think that's up to personal taste. For me, I didn't mind it too much. It kind of sets up some of these characters, and I just enjoy seeing Spectre doing these things and setting up this plan. And I also enjoyed seeing Spectre kind of, spoilers, successfully executing this plan. But in my head, I didn't really need to spend a lot of time on it because I feel like that's not what the film was really about. So I see your point, but I think for me, I actually thought it was fine because you don't need to know everyone's names because all the important people come back and you kind of get reintroduced to them anyway. And this is more just kind of like, oh, this is just Spectre's plan and how it's going ahead, which is quite different from Russia with Love, where the plan is going ahead the entire time. This instead has a Spectre plot going on just at the start, which is pretty successful, and Bond has to foil it. So I actually quite like that as a Spectre film or a Spectre plot that kind of does things a little bit differently to one we've seen before.
Yeah, I mean, at least they were fairly successful, Spectre. They did quite well with their plan in this one.
This is when I got a little bit confused, to be honest. This is the point when I got confused. Because we see before this scene of the pilot, so the pilot gets into a jet, so we know it's a fake version of the pilot, and him and a few others get into this very high-tech jet and take off. And before this scene, we see Bond and the masseuse in a hotel room where Bond is massaging her with these big bear claws or something. Like, I don't think they're bear claws. But
I think they're mink.
Yeah, like these big fluffy mink things on his hand. So they establish that they're in this hotel room. And then when the plane gets off, it then cuts back to those two. And she's like, oh, these bloody jets always kind of taking off. It's enough to drive you mad, I think she says. And I'm like, I did not associate that at all. So I guess this airfield is meant to be really close to this health clinic?
That's a stroke of luck, isn't it? Like the place where he gets his plastic surgery is right next to where he needs to be.
But it's also the place that Bond just happens to be. So Bond has happened to go to a random health clinic, which also happens to be a health clinic that can give you that type of surgery to make you look like someone, that also is right next to an airfield, enough that you can just hear it quite loudly in the health clinic itself. Like, it's a bit like, okay. But it was one of those where, like, I don't mind a bit of a coincidence with these films, like Bond being there. It's a bit weird, but fine. It'd be nice if they explained it like they did with Goldfinger at the start, but this one I didn't mind it too much. But this one kind of made me confused because it just seemed like such a big coincidence that they would be right next to it. And it's like, was expected like, oh, that's a bonus. We can do it right there. Like, I guess it confused me because it's too much of a coincidence.
It doesn't really help with the way that the film is cut together as well. Having said that, I don't know exactly what they could have done, like have a big pan out and just see the two places right next to each other. Probably not that. But yeah, the fact that it cuts so strictly from one to the other. And you're right. Like, at first I was kind of a bit taken aback by, oh, she's mentioning the plane that we just saw? Oh, okay then. Yeah, it could have been handled better, definitely.
Yeah, you just didn't need it, I don't think. But because of, I can't remember why, but Bond then decides to leave and do a little bit more investigating. Do you remember why he leaves to do that?
Oh, that's a good question. It's because he sees the car outside in the window with a what they carry bodies on, trolley. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah.
Ambulance trolley thing.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So the British agent Lippe comes back, and then they wrap up this body in a carpet, I believe. So Bond goes to look around. He then finds the carpet on the rack where he had his awful experience before. He opens it up to find the man in bandages, and he unwraps the bandages to see it's the pilot.
The real pilot. Yeah, and this is the scene I was saying, which had good music as well. The good sneaky music.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it was a similar part of the score anyway.
Yeah.
So as he unwraps the pilot, he then goes to pick up the phone to report it. But while this is happening, we see that there are men nearby, someone with a gun, which I believe you said was Lippe, which I trust you on that one. I just don't remember it.
It was. I'm sure it was.
It would make sense if it was. This just shows how little I remember this character.
But it's Lippe. He nearly had his own spin-off.
Not Lippe.
Yeah.
So as he's calling the phone, or on the phone, another hand then comes out of the window, which I don't think is Lippe. I think it's a second person.
Yeah, I don't understand who that's meant to be, because Lippe was quite clearly being ready to shoot him with the silenced gun. So did he know that he had like someone else working for him that was about to attack Bond as well, or is it? I don't know. Either way, Bond seems very nonchalant about it. Just kind of leaves it there and walks off.
Yes. Well, no, he gets the phone, gives it the old slapperoo. So he does fight him a little bit.
A little bit, yeah, and then goes and sets off the alarm.
Yeah, so to basically cause panic and make sure everyone finds the body.
Yeah.
I do like that Bond kind of acts like he doesn't know what's happening. There is something kind of... I told about Sean Connery not being very charming with women, but it did make me laugh, and it's oddly charming when he's doing his acting, like his fake acting, like, oh, I don't know what happened. This is all very bizarre. Like everyone's like asking. It's that made me laugh.
There's quite a lot of that in this film. A lot of Bond acting facetious in front of people, and yeah, a little bit clueless. It almost a little bit too much, I would say, sometimes, where it seems he's just sort of, as we come to find out that there is a very kind of strict deadline, there's a very time-sensitive plot, and at points he's just sort of still having a bit of fun and not really, doesn't seem to really care too much, but that is later on.
He has a process, Joe. You got to respect the process.
Trust the process, yeah. So then we cut back to the Vulcan bomber, the NATO flight. It's a training flight which has nukes on board, and we have the fake pilot, the plastic surgery pilot on board, who I think is meant to be there just to sort of oversee it because he's very high command, but he ends up sitting in the front with the other pilot and uses his little gas canister gadget to poison everyone else on board and leave himself safe. And that kind of lets him now take over the plane and divert it to what ends up being Nassau. This whole scene is quite... I mean, it's not a very long scene. It's very... to me, it was a little bit too methodical because you're just seeing the plot in action, and that really just encompasses plugging a gas canister and then seeing people die, and then him looking at lots of dials on the plane for quite a while. I mean, it's fine.
A man has a sandwich, Joe. I think you're forgetting the sandwich aspect of it all.
That changes everything, because you really feel for that character then.
Yeah, he had a sandwich.
That sandwich will never get eaten.
But to be fair, like, he probably was eating it, and I like to think the clone guy was like, he's like, oh, when he finishes his sandwich, I'm going to gas him so good. And he's just there enjoying his sandwich. He's like, just finish it. No, don't eat the crusts. Oh!
He wants to respect the man to finish his sandwich, but he takes a long time.
I will allow you one last meal.
Yeah, so he kills them all, takes over the controls, And to me, you just get far too much of looking at dials and the plane taking a different course. I think I was starting to like the scene when it was very loud. I don't know if you noticed how loud it was and the sort of wind and the whine of the engines. I thought, oh, this is quite, it makes it quite uncomfortable in a way because it's just not very nice to listen to after a while. But I think it just outstayed its welcome. But anyway, it's not really much to it. He just kidnaps the plane and gets it I think he gets it to a point where it's not being picked up on radar.
Yeah.
Is it now where we get the little cut back to the command base and them saying, oh, we've lost it?
Yeah, so 2 generals, British generals, I believe, are saying like, yeah, the jet has disappeared from radar. But I think they explain that once the jet is too low, altitude-wise, they can't see it. So, and they also explain there are nuclear missiles on this plane, so we should probably find it. Although in a very British way, I appreciate.
They didn't really seem very fussed about it.
Just like, very
bloody
well, hell,
yes.
Governor.
Very well, let's start a search and inform Washington. Yes, sir. It's just walks off. Yeah. I expected red alarms to start going or something, but no, very low.
That is red alarms going off. Did you not? Did you not hear it?
Monocles being dropped and smashed on the ground or something like that.
Tea's being spilt.
So then, am I right in thinking that it goes back to the plane and then we get a very long sequence of it landing and the whole operation from the guys in the water? It all goes on for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't know if we should just quickly sum this up because for a good, like you say, for a good while, all we see is the plane and what Spectre plans to do with it. So initially we get Dr. Largo. Why do I keep saying Dr. Largo? It's not Dr. Largo. It's Mr. Largo.
He might be a doctor.
Well, maybe, but no one refers him to that, so he can't be a very good one. So number 2 is overseeing this jet, and something I actually thought was quite cool, where they said turn on the underwater landing lights, and all these lights come on, and it forms like a landing strip on the ocean. I thought that was a neat little touch there.
Yeah, they've got a plan, that Spectre. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, so then the jet lands on the water, it allows it to flood. The clone or the guy who's in there has an oxygen mask, so he's okay. And then number 2, or Mr. Largo, puts on diver gear along with other people and then goes to the jet to basically steal the missiles off him. But instead of initially stealing the missiles, Largo goes up to the clone guy. He's stuck and he can't get out. So Mr. Largo gets the knife out, goes to cut him, but actually cuts the oxygen pipe and steals a white box off him, which I believe are the arm codes or something like that for the missiles. And I believe the reason is because the clone guy asked for more money, so rather than give him more money, they just cut the pipe. I think that's what's meant to have happened there.
I like to think they probably would have killed him anyway, to be honest.
Just cover your tracks, right? Just leave him in there.
Yeah.
It's very it's not very Blofeld. I think if it was Blofeld, he would have just shot a random diver, and that would have been his lesson.
Yeah, no, I did like that bit, but I did not like this scene. As you say, we shouldn't really. There's not a lot to talk about. It is just very long, and I get the impression that they were kind of proud of all the underwater shots. I think maybe underwater filming was in its infancy in terms of cinema back then. It was quite a new thing, or a very difficult thing to do anyway. So they really dwelled on these shots, and it's not interesting stuff to look at. It's people hammering down nets. It's like, this isn't why I come to watch a Bond film. It's literally the operation in process down to a T. And it's like, I don't need to see it down to a T. The plane has crashed. You're going to cover it. You can knock out 50% of the shots and I'll still know what's happened. I was very pleased when this bit moved on.
I agree with you in terms of like Thunderball needs to be edited down. And if there's anywhere you would edit, it's these scenes. But to be honest, I actually really like this scene. I liked how methodical it is. I like that they took ages showing everything. I just kind of got lost in it a bit. I was just, as you kind of say, this was probably very impressive back then. But even now, I was like, this is really cool that so much of this is underwater and they're able to show everything that's going on. Now, at the time, I hadn't finished my ice cream because I was having a little ice cream while watching this.
Okay.
Yeah, I was having a little ice cream. So this was a perfect chance for me to finish it off. So there I was. I put my phone down because I didn't need to do any notes. All I put was handle like eggs is written on the missiles. That's weird. And then I just finished my ice cream and enjoyed the ballet of sorts.
I'm sorry. Just the image of you chowing on some ice cream.
Yeah.
I need you to watch this again without any ice cream.
What? No. Oh,
Because I don't
that's
think
not
you're
fair.
No, it is fair. Not
Oh.
everyone has ice cream, Tom, when they're watching this film. Not
Well,
everyone is
that's
so
your
fortunate. I had no ice cream, and I had to endure every grueling minute of hammering down a camouflage net, over a sunken Vulcan bomber.
It was like a raspberry ripple kind of thing as well.
I was going to say like Ben and Jerry's, or I don't know, something would have been good.
So great scene is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Great ice cream.
Great ice cream. Great ice cream. But no, I like this stuff. And we'll talk about the water scenes a bit more. But this one, I was actually quite into it because I was like, this is quite impressive. And I enjoy seeing this all kind of play out. But I also 100% agree. This film definitely needs to be edited down. And this is definitely a very good place to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So after that, the dive, we're not done with the divers yet. They come off, they all dry off. And then number 2 draws on a map, which I think is highlighting where the bombs are, basically, where they're hidden. And then we have another slide transition. I wrote these down. I won't talk about them every time, but I did note down when there were the slide transitions. And it cuts to... Hold on, this is all very confusing. So this film has a lot of quick edits. So it's like we go straight from the underwater, straight to number 2 drying off with a towel, drawing on a map, and then straight away to morning, where number 2 speaks to Blofeld saying we've been successful, and then that cuts back to Bond in the health clinic, and that's over the course of like a minute. So it can be hard to kind of talk about this film sometimes because of those quick edits, and we haven't had anything like this in any of the other Bond films, so it's actually... a very big change in the pacing, which I think sometimes works, but as you've kind of said, it does make this beginning of the film a little bit more rushed than maybe you would have liked.
Yeah, I suppose you can go either one of two ways, which we've touched on, which is either you just sort of sit back and just let it go, let it play out. Don't really question it too much. Just sit down, eat your ice cream, enjoy the film. If you go the other way though, where you're someone who's like you actually kind of want to pay attention to the details. I'm not saying one's better than the other, by the way. You will be lost with this film unless you really pay attention. So I don't know. It depends on how you want to watch the film, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, if you want to know everything. But I just feel like we've talked about it with the other Bond films. It's easy to miss details, and that changes my mindset with some of these, where I kind of let those details go to the wayside. Although a rewatch, normally you kind of put it all together. So if I were to rewatch this film, I would 100% put stuff together and be like, oh yeah, that's the guy. That makes sense now. Finally.
Everyone's favourite.
Yeah, so Bond then drives away in the Aston Martin, which I was thinking about this. It was really nice to see the Aston Martin again from Goldfinger, but then I don't think we see it again for like a good number of films, which seems a little bit weird. And I think actually having this car in this film actually somewhat robs it a little bit of its personality a bit. Where if they had a unique car and something quite different, it would help Thunderball stand out a lot more. And I think because when you think Aston Martin, you think Goldfinger. No one's thinking Thunderball.
Yeah.
But this is the car he drives, and you see it in a couple of scenes. So I think it's actually might have been smarter if they did mix up the car, because you're just never going to think of this film when it comes to the DB5.
Do you know what? They would have done that, I'm sure, if it weren't for the crap ton of money they probably made on Aston Martin toys.
Yeah.
And so I bet they thought, right, let's just get it in here so we can sell another huge lot of is it Dinky diecast or whatever the brand of or the Bond cars back then. So that's probably why. But I think you're right. Like, you're totally right. It does, because it doesn't really do much in this film. You've got the water jets at the beginning and the bulletproof shield, but here, does it? In this upcoming chase scene, does it really do anything?
No. So calling it a chase scene might be a bit generous. So Bond drives away in the Aston Martin. He's being followed, which I assume is by Lippe, now that you say it.
Yeah.
But Lippe's master plan is that I'll just shoot my gun at him out the window. Like, it made me laugh a little bit because normally there's a little bit of a plan, but he just goes really quick and then just gets a gun and just shoots at Bond. And it's like, okay, all right, if you're sick of trying to kill Bond in any sort of artful way, fair enough to you.
It will work later on.
I suppose so. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
So instead of Bond being killed and the film being over, a golden motorbike with a mysterious person shows up. This also, I enjoyed this. Shoots a missile out the front of the motorbike, and that blows up the car.
Yeah. Oh, well, of course, we get another lovely vehicle explosion because it blows up the car partially, which is enough to then cause it to veer, because you probably would do if your car's been missiled. And then it goes over to the side of the road, and then you get the big explosion.
At least this one, there was a missile involved. It's not just a slight crash. Like, I can give it that.
If it had just blown up because of the veer and then into the ditch, that would have been comedy gold. But at least it had the missile as a bit of a setup for it.
Which was quite funny in its own way. Like, it was quite unexpected.
Yeah.
And then, so the person on the bike, Bond drives off and is fine. And then we see the bike gets dumped off by the driver in a river or something like that. The helmet comes off to reveal it's a woman, but I actually only just connected it while I was reading my notes that it's the Spectre agent protecting James Bond.
Well, I don't know if she was protecting Bond. It was based on Blofeld's order to kill Lippe because he'd basically, kind of like with number 5 in From Russia of Love, where his plan, I don't think it's so much that the plan had gone wrong. Oh, it's because the clone guy was a liability, Blofeld thought, because he asked for more money. So he blamed that on Lippe because he was Lippe's choice. So he said, kill Lippe. And she did.
When did Blofeld tell her to kill Lippe?
He didn't tell her, but he told Largo on the phone.
All right, okay. Okay, fair. I missed that. I totally missed that point. I didn't even know that was the woman who was... I was just like, oh, that's weird. We'll find out who she is. Not even connecting it to the one before.
Don't you love the start of this film?
I mean, it was good ice cream. I can't.
Oh my God.
What do you want from me?
You have to tell me the brand later on.
I'll send you some, mate.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then we get to, this, the classic Bond setup where Bond is now back going to see M. And another twist. They love the twist with the hats where he opens up the door. He goes to throw his hat onto the rack. He's seen that it's been moved. So he just sadly puts the hat on the rack rather than throwing it.
I love the little Bond hat rack arc we have going for these early Bond films. Honestly,
So
it's a roller
good.
coaster of emotions.
It's not even the end of it. There's hat revelations coming up, Joe.
Can't wait.
Can't wait. So we got Moneypenny waiting and she's like, you're late. You were supposed to be here before. And she sends him to the conference room. And I was like, okay, conference room. We'll get a big board meeting, things like that. I don't know. He then goes into the conference room, which is this insanely massive room with
So big.
these insanely massive paintings, this massive chandelier, and it's just like an insane set. I definitely appreciate it, but when you say conference room, you don't think massive old Renaissance style paintings on the walls.
No, it's almost too big for its own good. Especially when you later see what the paintings are and it's actually big maps. It's just ludicrous how big these maps are on the wall. It's just, why does it need to be that big?
Yeah. Because I thought we might get the dinner scene from the last one, where they spoke to the colonel. I thought that might be the conference room. But no, this is a much bigger and over-the-top room.
They weren't kidding with the whole bigger, better Bond or whatever it says on the poster. Everything really is bigger.
Yeah, we got bigger conference rooms.
Should have put that on the poster.
Yeah. As well as hat revelations.
Oh, yeah.
So We then see that there's M and a few other important looking people on one table. On the opposite side of this huge room is this small semicircle with 9 chairs and this table, of which I believe either Moneypenny or someone says these are the other double O agents, and every single double O agent has been called in. And Bond is the last one there, of which M then somewhat sarcastically says, well, now that we're all here, we can finally start, which was a neat little touch.
I love the whole setup with Bond being with the other agents. You don't really see them. There's definitely, I don't think there's any direct shots on any of them. They're always just kind of in the sides when it's on
you
Bond.
do see them.
But do you like see them directly? Because I couldn't. Oh, okay. I must have missed that. But yeah, it's such a cool thing to have where you actually see a wider picture. Because sometimes it's it's easy to forget that M is actually, he's head of the department of MI6. He has other people to deal with. It's not just Bond. And so you're seeing them all here. It's kind of how, with the pre-title sequences, you get the idea that there's all the things that Bond does that you don't see, or these missions that you see the tail end of. And it's kind of like, this is a little bit more of that sort of thing, where there's just so much more outside of the films in terms of the Bond universe. It's cool. I like that. It's a shame that it kind of took how many years until GoldenEye to actually get another 00 agent in the film properly, but there you go.
Yeah, I love this. I love this scene in general as well. It's just so cool to see the other 00 agents. And the fact that they trigger it for like the 4th film in means like there's been a real build up to this kind of moment. But I also really enjoy the parallel between we both find out more about Spectre as an organization and they have their own conference room and big meeting. And then parallel to that, we see MI6's big meeting with all the 00 agents. So we both get all the different numbers, number 3, number 2, or whatever, of that organization. And in the very same film, we see the 00 agents all in one room. It's a very smart way to build that escalation. And in terms of like feeling like you've gone in this journey and you're learning more about these organizations throughout these films, it feels like a real payoff to everything we've heard about Spectre and MI6 from the previous films. Yeah, although you got to admit, Spectre has the better room. Sorry. Ooh. Yeah, maybe. It's not as big. It doesn't have the high ceilings. People love a high ceiling, Joe.
I didn't see any of the 00 agents get electrocuted and drop down a pit, so kind of obvious for me.
You have failed me for the last time, 006.
No, M, no.
And then
Moneypenny.
003 dies.
He gets Moneypenny to push the button for him.
Yeah. So the Home Secretary is there and gives a briefing about what's going on. He plays a tape which has Blofeld's voice saying, "We're Spectre, we're here to say we're going to steal missiles every single day." Something to that effect.
Verbatim, yeah.
Yeah. And basically he says, "We have these nuclear missiles from this jet. If you don't pay us £100 million, we will destroy a major city either in the US or the UK." They won't announce. And it is during this scene that we see the other agents. So basically there's a couple of shots of Bond, but like kind of a bit of an angle. And he's sitting to someone with a goatee. Did you see the goatee man?
I saw the goatee man, yeah. I saw it because he's sort of sitting, as you say, because they're in a semicircle. You can see some of them, yeah.
Yeah, and then the one next to him that they kept, you can't see him as well, but he's definitely there. And he looks bored the whole time because he has his hand in his face every single time they show him.
Oh, that's 004. He's no good.
Ugh. This guy.
Honestly. No, I didn't notice the hand in the face, actually. That's quite funny.
Yeah, but they don't focus on, you're right, they don't focus on it at all, but you do get to see, I don't remember them actually showing any of these, but the fact that they show the shot of Bond sitting next to what is meant to be another 00 agent, and it's just a guy with a goatee, I'm like, that's kind of cool. I would like to know more, but it's cool that they actually show them in some capacity.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just keep thinking about the giant paintings in this scene. It's just, I keep thinking, who made the map? Because the paintings reveal they slide up and then it's a map underneath, and it's a map of where the missiles might be based on the range of the bomber, the Vulcan bomber, and its flight. And it's like, very sensible information to show. Why couldn't it have been a printout? I just picture the poor guy whose job it is to go up on the ladder and make this giant map that's shown for 10 seconds. It's just like, oh, I know I shouldn't be focusing on these things, but I love it. It's so silly.
It's not electronic, is it? Like, because nowadays it'll just be a screen and you'll be like, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just get a screen installed.
Yeah. Could it not just have been in that dossier that they opened later? No, there has to be a giant map on the wall. It has to.
And then everyone gets told you can open up your folders where it has all the information about the case, and we find out that the code name for this is Thunderball, which I don't think they explain. Does it explain in the book why it's called Thunderball?
I don't think so. I think it's just a cool word. And that's exactly how M says it as well. He goes, Thunderball.
Yeah, not very in character, but he makes it work. Blofeld did just do a rap, so I think it's fine.
Anything goes in this film.
It's a bigger Bond, let me tell you.
Bigger M. So following that, we have M talking to Bond directly, and I think the Home Secretary, is it him? There's another guy there anyway, who is there to talk about what they know so far, and that's where we get the insight that Bond probably knows where to start looking. I think he was originally going to be assigned to, because all the 00 agents are going to be sent all over the world to try and find out where these nukes are, basically. I think Bond was originally going to be sent to Canada, which that would have been an interesting film, like a sort of alternate universe thing. But no, he persuades M to send him to Nassau instead. I'm now struggling to remember why. Oh, it's because the photo had the clone guy on it, or the real guy.
Yeah, so the pilot has a sister, and there's a picture of the sister and him. So Bond says, I should track down the sister instead to find out what she knows.
Yeah, and the other guy, the government guy in the room as well, is sort of a bit dubious of this. And I like how in this film, M just like so clearly has Bond's back. Like he trusts his agents. And I put down that M just seems quite chirpy in this film. He actually seems not very. In the past, they made him quite grumpy and just get on with this. Yeah, maybe a little throwaway line or something. But I don't know. I just got the impression that M's in a good mood in this film, especially later on when Bond leaves and has the little line with Moneypenny, who calls him the old man, and M was kind of within earshot and kindly don't refer to me as the old man. I don't know. I like that. I liked M being a little bit more cheerful, and also just, as I say, being very very protective. Well, maybe not protective, but trustful of Bond and his judgment. I like that detail.
Yeah, we see the other side of M a little bit, because at the moment all the other plots have actually been quite small as far as things go. I guess not tiny, but not quite the same as Spectre's going to nuke a city and kill millions of people. So before we only saw M as the highest authority, but now that another authority has come in, like you say, like M will shout down Bond, but he does it because he trusts Bond, and we see that here. And it all goes into the escalation part, that we see a different side to M and all these other characters, and it makes it feel like a bigger film, which I appreciate. So this is when we get the hat revelation. This is it. So after Bond goes to leave after talking to Moneypenny, he goes to take his hat, and the hat is gone from the rack. And it's just like, I guess my hat's gone, and then leaves. But
what? I don't know.
Where's the hat gone?
I must have completely missed this. Where's the hat?
Yeah, he goes to get it, and it's not on the rack. And then he leaves. So I'm assuming they're setting up that in You Only Live Twice, he's not going to have the hat. But they don't explain where the hat went.
Does he comment about the hat missing?
Nope.
Huh.
He just goes to get it. It's not there. He says, that's off. He just looks a bit puzzled and then leaves.
That's weird.
It is weird, right?
I really didn't even spot that, to be honest.
Oh, you're not even.
I was too busy writing the old man in my notes, clearly.
I put down my ice cream, Joe. I was so livid.
Wow. So is that it now with Bond and hats?
I don't know. I don't remember the next film. But if it is, then it's like somebody wrote a scene to explain why the hat's gone for this film.
Hats suddenly became very out of fashion mid-shooting this film.
Yeah, they
we
were
need
like,
to
"No."
get rid of the hat.
Sean Connery is like, it's in my contract for the next one. I'm not wearing a hat.
Oh, I love a bit of hat drama, I do.
But then if the hat is in the next film, then why was the hat missing in this one?
I don't, yeah.
I
You're
got
asking
questions.
the right questions, yeah.
Yeah, I got questions. I need answers.
Well,
I mean,
think
we'll
the
find out
director-
next week, but I'm going to be I'm very excited to find out.
I don't think you're going to be satisfied.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, that probably sums up a lot of the remaining Sean Connery films, but
Get your ice cream ready. That's what I'm going to say.
yeah, I'm going to need a few tubs for sure. So after the hat revelations, we then pretty much instantly cut to Bond has found Domino, I believe is the name of the woman, the sister of the pilot, and she is swimming underwater, riding turtles. It's okay.
I like that. I want to go ride with turtles.
I mean, it looks really fun.
Yeah.
But you go from like Moneypenny calling M an old man to a woman riding a turtle, which, I guess they were going for intentional whiplash there. But Bond is watching.
Sorry, I just need to get this insight. Maybe the turtle is meant to represent M because it's old.
It's the old man turtle, and Moneypenny's the woman, right?
Terrence Young is a genius.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing. There was a reason for that cut.
If there's no hat explanation, I need to see if Terrence Young is still alive, so I can.
He's dead.
Oh, what?
He's long dead.
Oh,
I'm
damn
sorry.
1994. Oh, I was way off.
No resolution.
He was born in China. That's interesting. Anyway, so basically the woman then gets stuck, or Domino then gets stuck, and Bond rescues her because he was just kind of watching her, as he likes to do with women. And then they swim back up, and yeah, this is when they kind of first meet, and she's quite a major character. Like, she is the Bond girl for this film, Domino, basically.
Yeah.
And something I really like about this is that I complained about how Bond and the masseuses, there's no chemistry, but these two actually do have chemistry. Like, she is being more playful and flirty and kind of responding a little bit more to Bond. Not going all in, but Bond's kind of doing his thing and she's doing her thing. And actually, I do quite like these two. And it kind of starts straight away with this scene where I can't remember any lines, I'll be honest with you, but there's a bit of chemistry there. I'm like, okay, yes, good start. I'm happy to see this.
I'm going to be honest. I totally forgot about this character as a Bond girl before watching this film.
Yep.
Forgot her name was Domino. Kind of forgot everything about her. But yeah, you're right. After coming away, actually, quite a good. No, not even quite a good character. As you say, good chemistry. She actually does stuff in the plot, progresses the plot. Not just a token Bond girl on the side. It's refreshing. It's a refreshing change. This meeting after the turtle scene, the only thing I wrote down about this I thought was kind of strange. I don't know whether they were doing this on purpose to try and do a bit of subversion about the whole Bond name introduction. I guess we're still very, very early in on the franchise, but it's still, Bond, James Bond. But this one, it's done so flippantly. Flipper, that's quite. I should have done something with that. But
Nice.
but yeah, did you notice how it was just over in about a second?
I noticed that in all these films, actually, they just don't care about this line in the intro. Like, it's a variant. Like, at some point, it's just like, I'm James, whatever. I'm James Bond. And sometimes he just says Bond. Sometimes he says Bond, James Bond. Like, I guess it wasn't that big of a deal, or they didn't think it was that big of a deal, because they're not consistent at all. And I don't know at what point they do get consistent and really hammer in that line a little bit more.
I mean, Dr. No has quite a bold one, but I think that's literally because it is the first time we see the character.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because later on, you get it's a joke in itself about Bond saying his name in a really awkward situation, or really rushed or something like that. And that's sort of the gag, is that he doesn't get to say it in the Bond manner. And it's like, yeah, with this one, it's just they just come out of the water and he just says, "Oh, Bond, James Bond," and it's just gone. Like, anyway, besides the point, yeah. So he saves her, Domino, and they get up together and they talk a little bit because this is where we also see that Bond has sort of an assistant for this mission. I can't remember her name now.
I didn't write it down, but I've looked it up. It's Paula.
Paula,
Paula,
yeah,
everybody.
Never really introduced. Well, I guess she's introduced in this scene, but yeah, he just has another agent working with him who kind of pretends that their boat's broken down, so he needs to get a trip back with Domino to the coastline, which is basically just an excuse for him to question her and get to know a little bit more about who she's with and kind of learning eventually about Largo. They get onto the beach. And then, did they go straight for like a meal or something like that?
Yeah, they go for a lunch by the pool. So as they're walking along the beach, we also see a mysterious grey figure in sunglasses, whoever that may be. So they're being watched. But yeah, then they go to the pool and have some lunch.
Yes, and this is where you hear the Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang instrumental in the background. I think it's where you start hearing it. And it's great. It's great. But yeah, I honestly can't even tell you what they discussed in this meeting. It's kind of, whatever it was good because they do play off each other very well. And as is the case with a lot of the female characters that Bond comes up against, they have that sort of antagonistic start to them where well, I guess it can go either way, but usually they will have a very much I'm not falling for your questions and your charms sort of thing, and then he eventually wins them over. And that's sort of what you get here, where she's just not having any of it really. She just wants to get on, but in a sort of floaty, flirty, charming way as well.
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like it's done a little bit better though, where yeah, she's not super into it, but again, she still just kind of seems to enjoy kind of Bond, really, which is more than you can say about other women in this film or in this franchise up to this point. And yeah, there's not much to this scene. It's just them kind of talking, but it's appreciated because again, it's a little bit flirty and them kind of talking to each other sets up them as her as the Bond girl. But we do find out in this scene that she has a guardian, so somebody is watching her. I can't remember if it said Largo in this scene, if we find out she's tied to Largo, but we do find that out very soon. There is a bit of an odd line in this one where I think she says, "What sharp eyes you've got," and then he says, "Wait until we get to my teeth." And
yes,
I guess it's maybe the grapes. Maybe he's talking about the grapes again. I don't know, but it's not his smoothest line for sure.
Or is a vampire. One of the two.
There we go. Now we're talking.
So many ideas forming.
So this then cuts very shortly to a party that is happening on the docks. A lot of people coming by boat because we're in the Bahamas. I'm not sure if we've said that. And a lot of this film takes place in the Bahamas and all these different islands around it. So this is now just at night, a load of people having a big party, and it's all very fancy and everyone's all very dressed up. And we see Sean Connery, or James Bond, back in his classic back tux, going into a casino, which is a really cool thing to see, like directly taken from Dr. No, really. And he goes up to a table and he sees Mr. Largo already sitting there where Bond goes to play with him.
I love this scene. I think there's just something to be said about Bond films needing a casino scene in them. It's kind of how I love when there's a train scene as well. It just feels right. And I think it's the same with a casino. You just need to have a little bit in a casino. And I think not only that, but this whole Bond and Largo I think it's the same game that they were playing in Dr. No. I still didn't look at what it's called, but where you have the bank or the bonk, whatever it is, and the cards and stuff. They end up playing that game together. And I just love this scene. I think it's just two great characters, although we don't know much about Largo at this point, but he does, I think, go on to become quite an interesting character. And you just see Bond sort of probing this Largo character that he's just heard about, and there's something about him, and you get I love the little bits where he's slipping in the word Spectre into
Oh, yeah.
the dialogue. Spectre of defeat, trying to catch out Largo. See
It's
see his
so not
response.
subtle.
It's not
So good.
subtle at all. I mean, it's sort of the beginning of where you see that they both know that each other is kind of bad, but they just go along for so long, just sort of putting up with one another. And this is kind of where that begins. And it's just Bond being so smarmy and cocky again. We spoke about cocky Bond in the last one, but this, I think it works really well here.
Yeah, it's a format we've seen a lot already, where it's Bond and a villain playing against each other in a game that doesn't really mean that much, but they both know each other's up to something, and we just see that dynamic, and that dynamic's just always fun to see. And I know you didn't really like the golf scene, but I think the golf scene is just a different version of this casino scene, where it's Bond and a villain just kind of throwing lines at each other, trying to win at this game, and it's just a friendly competition, but there's so much more at stake. And maybe this one's more effective because it is, like you say, Bond feels very correct in a casino, and it's just great to see him in that tux. But I think this is something that the Bond film does really, or Bond series in general does very well, putting Bond in these situations, and it's just enjoyable seeing Bond just poking the bear, basically, and just trying to get a rise out of these, like, who are meant to be very smart people and not really getting a rise, but still seeing him try. It's just always fun to see this dynamic play out.
Yeah. And Largo himself, the actor that plays him, I had to look him up just now, Adolfo Celli, just a cool looking guy. I mean, the eye patch helps. Eye patches always make people look cooler. I don't think it's ever explained why he has an eye patch. One of those things we don't need to. In fact, it's probably better that you don't know. It just adds a bit of mystery to the character. But yeah, I think the way that they're constantly trying to one up each other in this game, and just the little quips and back and forths, it's great.
Oh yeah, very enjoyable for sure. So to go through the next scenes quite quickly here. So Bond kind of offers to buy Domino a drink, of which number 2 or Largo says, yeah, sure, go ahead. That'd be very helpful. Because Domino is a mistress, basically, of Largo, we find out. So they then invite him to Sunday lunch, where Largo then says, what did you talk about with Mr. Bond? Because they have a brief chat where Bond's trying to get some info. Largo's all like, hey, what did you talk about? She tells him it's not really all that much. And then after that, we cut to Bond going to the hotel, and everyone, they love putting Bond in hotels, and I know why, but we always have to go through this scene of Bond investigating in a hotel room and looking around. It's just yeah, it's a Bond film. It's like more classic than other staples, like Bond in a hotel. And we do go through this routine again here of Bond checking his hotel to eventually find a man with a gun who's trying to kill him.
Yeah. Small fry, because he just lets him go in the end because he knows it's just Largo spying on him. And we finally, is this where we work out who the mysterious figure on the beach was? Is it now, or is it earlier that this?
No,
was
it's now. So the grey suit shows up and knocks on the door, and Bond punches him in the stomach.
Yes.
And pulls him in because Bond has been recording his room and he's able to figure out somebody's in there. So he's trying to track him, but Felix shows up at the wrong time. So he punches him in the stomach, leaves him there. He then takes up the small fry, takes him go, and then we are introduced to Felix for the third time in the series.
Third time, and a third new Felix. It's another new actor. Now, last time in Goldfinger, I did complain that I thought the character of Felix was too old, because I think they're meant to be similar ages. This one, a lot better, younger, kind of has that American, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, he's better suited to the character. Still don't think it's a very good Felix. I don't really think we ever got a very good Felix until quite far along the film franchise, because he's kind of a bit of an empty character in the end. But at least it's a step in the right direction. They made him younger, so there you go.
Yeah, I thought he was a solid Felix, but there's just not much you can do when they keep recasting the character. It sucks. Like, imagine if this was the same person in all three films, in Dr. No, in Goldfinger and this one. That would be so cool
Yeah.
to see Sean Connery and someone who's consistent as Felix keep meeting up like this. But the fact they recast it just sucks all life out of this character. And yeah, he doesn't need to do too much if he was just someone you saw all the time. But the fact that I saw him being recast again, I was like, ugh, just like, how am I supposed to be interested in this character when they just keep refreshing him? And it really kills it for me, which is just, it just sucks because it would have been so cool if it was the same dude.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of why the Daniel Craig Felix works a whole lot better. And also something that is very obvious. Just, I think this is the nature of the characters really, is that Felix can't really be more interesting than Bond. It's a Bond film. It's not a Felix film. So what that means is it just ends up being someone just as a bit of it's not even a sidekick. He's just there and just does some bits every now and then, but nothing really interesting. It's just purely to push the plot along. And I think this one in particular just seems very, very kind of empty behind the eyes sort of thing. It's just, I don't know, there's just not much to it, but maybe it's a bit of a doomed character really anyway.
Yeah, it's nice to see Felix, though. I do like him being here, but they've just kind of messed up the character too much by this point in the franchise. They need stability, and we just don't have it yet, which means it's always going to be a little bit disappointing and hollow.
Yeah. So we cut to Largo in his lovely home in the Bahamas, Palmyra, I think it's called, or something like that. And the small fry comes back from a failed bust at Bond in the hotel, and Largo is clearly not a big fan of this. So we get sharks. Honestly, they say about how Austin Powers ruined Bond. It really did for a lot of things. I just can't think of sharks without thinking of like laser beams on their freaking head from Austin Powers whenever you see sharks in Bond films like this. But yeah, Largo has a nice big pool full of sharks in his home, because why wouldn't you? And the guy, the small fry, literally does become a small fry, which I guess is quite good, and gets pushed into the sharks to get eaten. Again, I mean, you don't really, nothing too graphic. It's all kept very like, oh, there's just a bit of red in the water, and then they move on, which is fine. We don't need any like Felix limb biting or head popping action quite yet in the series. But yeah, you kind of see that Largo doesn't mess around, and the sharks are definitely a prominent thing in this film. You do see quite a lot of them. I guess there are a lot of sharks in the Bahamas. So yeah. And I think really that's kind of it. It just kind of sets up that there are sharks in Largo's home, and that we will not, it's not going to be the end of them.
Yeah, I actually like the sharks more than I thought I would, because I didn't think I would for the reasons you described. They're just such a cliche that you just can't be afraid of them. But I actually did quite like them. And the subtle thing they did here is what you said. You don't see him be eaten at all. He just gets pushed in, and then they show the water going from blue to red, which was a really nice parallel and throwback to the opening sequence where that went from blue to red and purple quite a bit. So it was nice to see that kind of come around. It's a small thing, but it made it a little bit more effective for me.
Yeah, all the shark scenes are dealt with quite professionally, in the sense of it's not, you're not getting any sort of Jaws-esque things with big sharks biting onto and then like obvious puppetry and stuff. It is just shots of sharks, and the tension is not so much them biting and eating things. It's just them being close. So, and I mean, sharks are sharks. You don't necessarily need to have all the big dramatic stuff. It's fine just to have them swimming around. That's enough danger, which we will see later on. But then,
yeah, I was surprised. I was surprised how much I liked the shark and their elements in this film. I was expecting not to like it, but for the reasons you said about how it's real and they have a presence, it works a lot better than the gore we see later. Yeah,
I will say the fact that they are real does put a little bit of a downer on things later on when you can see them actually get shot with things, which I didn't quite like. But animal rights in film industry wasn't quite where it is now, I suppose. So they
didn't get to women's rights by this point, so animals were second to them.
True, yeah, there was a long way to go. But following this scene, we get our Q scene of the film. Q's back, and literally back in terms of he is out in the field this time, which was quite nice to see. I kind of forgot that they did this so soon because I always think of License to Kill.
I thought it was The Living Daylights.
Is it Living Daylights?
It's definitely a Timothy Dalton one. I think it's The Living Daylights where Q gets a bit more involved.
Yeah, one of those two. I always think of that film when I think of Q going out and not just being in the Q branch underground. But no, it happens now, and I completely forgot that.
Yeah, I forgot that as well, but it's really nice. So basically they've set up this small little operation, him and Felix and a few other kind of random people who are just kind of there to help and support, and they've built this kind of area, and then Q is there, and we get the Q branch scene. Now I'm going to hand it over to you because I was trying to write down all the gadgets, but I kind of couldn't keep up. So I'm pretty sure I've missed some because he gets a lot of gadgets in this film compared to previous films.
He does, yeah. Although once again, it's all quite sensible gadgets. We're not getting crazy exploding pens again still. It's things like a camera that's a Geiger counter, or a little rebreather so you can breathe underwater for 4 minutes just as a little last resort thing, or the radioactive pill that acts as a tracker. That they're all very useful things that you might actually see being used in spy work. And they are all eventually used, and it's good because it kind of goes back to From Russia with Love, and not so much Goldfinger, which we talked about all the gadgets being the car basically, and therefore all being used in the same situation. At least with this film, all those gadgets are used for different things, and not only that, but by different people as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I like the practicality of this. This doesn't have like the tension that I described about From Russia with Love, but it was just more of a practicality thing. Bond just has all these gadgets and he just kind of uses them as he needs them. So yeah, for me anyway, there was no satisfying payoff, but it was still satisfying seeing Bond using all this gear in all these situations and having it just kind of apply and be helpful. So it's a very different style, I feel like, from Russia with Love, but I still think it works. It's just nice to see Q give him all the stuff and then he just kind of uses it. It just works. I liked it.
Yeah. Although later on, I think some of them, I don't know if they just sort of wrote themselves into a corner with some of these gadgets. Maybe I don't know why they couldn't have just cut them out. But to me, later on, it seems like some of them were used just for the sake of being used and actually not being. I'm thinking of the tracker, but we'll get onto that a bit later. I just think, like, why was that needed? But I don't think we missed any gadgets, did we? Or maybe we did.
Maybe. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot.
There is a lot. Well, there you go. If we did, we did.
So something I did notice about this scene, because we spoke about in Goldfinger how Q to you didn't feel like the full version of Q just yet, where to me I felt like it was a little bit more. But seeing his dynamic in this film, I kind of got what you were talking about a little bit more, where he's just got so little patience for Bond and what he's doing. Although one thing we do see, which I don't think they talk about, is the jetpack sort of thing that Bond uses underwater. Jetpack's probably the wrong term, but you know that big thing that's on his back that like propels him forward.
Oh, is that the thing he's fiddling with, like turning on the lights?
Yeah, it's the thing he's fiddling with in the scene.
Yeah.
So we see that as well, but yeah, like you say, Q just is very. I feel like he is very fleshed out at this point. If he wasn't for you last time, I would assume he is in this time because he just has no patience for Bond messing around with stuff.
Yeah, this is definitely they've now reached that point where it stays for the whole, all the time. Desmond Llewellyn is Q, and I guess you could even think like, well, Q's been brought all this way out. Maybe he would be grumpier. Maybe he doesn't want to be here. But then that being said, he is in his nice little kind of Hawaiian shirt and everything. So, yeah, maybe he's on holiday as well. I don't know.
He could be. Maybe the actor didn't want to be there. I am an old white man. What are you doing?
This is where we find out it was actually just on the Pinewood soundstage.
Yeah, probably, right? It was indoors, so it probably was.
Probably.
Yeah. So we have a lot of very quick scenes, so I'll get them quite quick. So again, we have another example of it just jumps between these quick little scenes, which it never did before. So we have Felix and Bond saying we need to board Largo's ship or boat because Largo is staying in this boat called Disco fold?
Disco Volante.
Volante. That's what, Disco Volante. So they decide, hey, Largo's a bad egg, we should go visit him. And then this cuts to the conference room back in MI6, where Blofeld is explaining how to send this money over to them. And then they're all saying, we're probably going to have to pay this money. And something that's actually quite nice is, I don't remember all the details of Diamonds Are Forever, but Blofeld specifically says, I want all this money in diamonds. And I'm pretty sure that's a reference to the events of Diamonds Are Forever, where they need diamonds to execute their plan.
Oh, interesting. I did not put those two things together. I just presumed diamonds would be because it's not a particular currency, so it's, I don't know, it would be tied to anything. But yeah, I like that idea more.
Yeah, I initially thought maybe that's it, but then the fact that Spectre's final plan in Diamonds Are Forever all revolves around diamonds, to me it almost implies that their whole schemes are actually trying to get a lot of diamonds. They need a ton of diamonds to do their scheme, and Thunderball actually might be their first attempt to get all these diamonds. So I thought that it's probably accidental, but a potential link, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah, I'll take it. I like that.
So then after this, we have a quick scene of Bond prepping for his mission. And then we go to night, where Bond gets in all his scuba gear, his red wetsuit and his lovely white shorts, and dives underwater to basically take pictures of Largo's ship and observe.
Yeah, they are using the camera already from Q, which is nice. I put down that, so I said before about being negative because this film having lots of underwater scenes. And so I saw the scene, I thought, oh, here we go. This is not going to be good. Actually, this one's fine. Really nothing to complain about. Bond is just underwater looking at the bottom of the ship and takes a photo of the hatch. Turns out there's an underwater hatch there. And then eventually he gets spotted by the crew on board, and they start dropping grenades in the water and eventually chasing him. So nice and quick, doesn't really drag on too long. I like the underwater shots here. You're right. Like, sometimes underwater things can be cool. I think it's just underwater fights that we see later on don't really work for me. But this was, perfectly fine. Perfectly fine scene.
It's the spy work scene, right? It's Bond knowing there's a bad guy. He's going to investigate the bad guy. He gets a little bit caught and then has to get out of there. We saw it in Goldfinger. We probably saw him from Russia with Love, but I can't remember. But we saw it in Goldfinger. It's that scene. But the twist is that he's underwater taking pictures of a boat. And I thought that was cool. And it is quite intense that Largo is like, get the hand grenades. We'll deal with this. And he just has the guy like, there, put the hand grenade down there. And then there's just explosions. You don't ever actually see the explosions near Sean Connery, I don't think. The camera just shakes a bit and the water shoots up, but it's pretty cool. I appreciate the plan. It's simple, but, just throw a load of hand grenades. That should solve the problem.
Yeah, and I like how you could see Bond sort of wincing with his ears because of what would have been the shockwave of it. And you're right, you don't see any explosions, but I think that's enough, along with the camera shaking and everything, to really sell the danger that Bond's in. It does the job.
Yeah, like you say, solid little scene. Bond then is able to get away because he's being chased by a little boat because they have found him, by getting rid of his oxygen tanks. And the people very quickly assume he's dead. They're just like, oh, oxygen tank. It's like, oh, he must have been killed by the rotors or whatever. Let's go back.
Yeah.
Like, instantly decide to leave.
Terrible henchman. I think Largo needs to go rehire because, they just give up so, comically fast. He must have been hit by the propeller. Let's go.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Scene over. Yeah.
No need to confirm. We're out of here.
Yeah, no blood or anything. Just go.
Nope. And then Bond is able to get away. He goes back to shore where he takes off his gear, walks up to the road, sticks his thumb out, and straight away there's a car where we see the Spectre woman from earlier. She's back! The one that was there when the pilot was killed and saved Bond using the motorbike missile, actually then picks him up and starts to drive very fast. Is pretty much this whole scene, right?
Yeah, I didn't really get what they were trying to do with this scene. I guess it's just a power dynamic of she She drives really fast. Women driving fast is mad. In the
Goodness.
60s? That's not possible. Yeah, she just drives really, really quickly back to the hotel. And it's meant, I don't really, is it meant to be, I really don't know. Bond looks a little bit shaken from it. But really, there's not much to it. They just drive back.
Yeah, there's not too much. It's more reintroducing this character is how I kind of take it. And Bond sees the Spectre ring, and I was thinking about it. It's like, do we actually see the Spectre symbol that much up to this point? Because it would have been in Goldfinger. Maybe it was in Doctor No, but I don't remember seeing it in From Russia with Love. I'm just curious if when Bond sees her ring with the octopus on it, would people at that time actually recognize it as Spectre's symbol?
I don't know if the audience would have, but it definitely was in From Russia with Love because I remember seeing it.
Okay.
Because it's the old Spectre symbol, which is like really wiggly, the really wiggly octopus, before they changed it into the slightly different one. So, yeah, it would have been seen, but I don't know if that would have been enough to link it to Spectre.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think some people might have missed it, but
Yeah.
it's still a cool throw. If you do get it, then that's quite neat. But it's another one of those power dynamics of Bond knowing who she is, she knows who Bond is, but they kind of got to play that game a little bit. But eventually she just drops him off at the hotel, which we do get an explanation for later, but it's like, here you go. Here's your stop, sir. So, oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then this goes to Bond and Felix then taking a look at the photos that they took, where they say the plane is underwater, because I think they surmise that because the boat has that hatch, it means that they must have... I actually don't know.
I don't blame you because this scene, the only thing I noted about this scene is that it moves so quickly that the dialogue isn't even finished by the time it's fading to the next scene. I think it's Paula who's talking about something, and it's literally the scene is now on the next scene. It's like she's just been cut off by the film. It's so quick. It's so quick. Poor Paula.
Yeah, justice for Paula, for sure. But this was just like bare minimum. They take a look at the photos. They say, right, because of this hatch, we know it's Spectre and we know the plane is underwater somewhere. So then we cut to Felix and Bond basically flying around the ocean being like, well, there's a plane here somewhere, I guess. And they just kind of look around. We get quite a few helicopter shots. And this is something I do appreciate about this film in general, where I know people kind of complain about the water and things like that, but I complained in the last podcast about Goldfinger how you don't really get a sense of where Bond has gone, where Switzerland could have just been any country in Europe, and America, you get a bit more going with America, but it's still not to its full potential. This whole film, now that we're here, after the England bit at the start, takes place in the Bahamas, and they do a really good job of setting the place, and we go a little bit back to what Dr. No did of here's Jamaica, and you get a good sense of what Jamaica's like, and From Russia with Love, here's Istanbul, you get a good sense of what that's like. This film goes back to that, and that's something I really kind of appreciate about this film overall, and I think is actually something that actually makes me like it quite a bit. This strong theming, and the strong theming around everything involving the Bahamas, the sharks being played in and things like that, the underwater scenes. This is about this island and these collection of islands and this kind of beautiful tropical water and things like that. And it kind of starts here a little bit because the helicopter shots just show this kind of beautiful blue ocean, and it sets up this theming that we already saw in the opening sequence as well. But it's something I really appreciate because it really ties the film together, and maybe it doesn't give it the strongest identity because everyone forgets this film, but it does have a clear identity, and it ties that identity to its location, and I think that plays heavily into the film's favour.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. This film, to me, is very similar to Dr. No in that regard, which is a good thing. I do like that it does show off so much of the Bahamas, even down to later on we get that sort of parade, Mardi Gras looking thing. I love that you're really getting all these different elements, day and night, and these different locations. So, yeah, definitely an improvement over Goldfinger for me.
Yeah, it's just an element that I don't need it in a Bond film, but when it has it, it does make it a little bit stronger in my eyes, especially these early ones with Sean Connery.
Yeah. So after that, we get Bond visiting Largo in his nice, fancy, shark-riddled home on the islands. And it starts off with Largo and what's her name again?
I don't know. I couldn't tell
Volpe?
you.
Is it Volpe?
Yeah, Volpe. That's got to be it.
Let's go with Volpe. Shooting clay pigeon targets across the ocean, which looks quite cool. I'd like to give that a go, to be honest. But I think this is where we learn. It's kind of similar to Goldfinger, where we learn about why Bond is still alive. Why there's this very obvious, they both know what each other's up to, but they're not really doing anything about it. Well, the bad guys aren't really doing anything about Bond. And it's because, similarly to what Goldfinger says about if Bond is killed, then they will, the game is up. They'll start looking here. They'll know something's going on. It's the same thing here, where if something happens to Bond here in Nassau, then it's going to be kind of obvious that, yeah, the bombs are here. So they have to keep him alive, but just off of the trail enough. So yeah, very, very similar to Goldfinger, but you kind of need this. Otherwise, you could just argue like, oh, well, there was so many opportunities for them to have killed him by now, but no. So after that, Bond does come to visit. Thinking about it, I think he gets invited, doesn't he? I think Largo invites him to his house earlier on.
Yeah, he did say before about coming to Sunday lunch, which I guess implies he knows that Bond would come over at some point.
Yeah. So Bond does come over. And it's basically, to me, this scene is just more of what we saw in the casino. More just little back and forth quips. If anything, Bond is even worse. Like, Bond is actually kind of annoying in this scene in just how boisterous he's being. So, for example, Largo gives him the chance to have a go, I think Bond asks if he could have a go on the pigeon shooting, and says something like, oh, it must be awfully difficult, and then just kind of shoots it blind, like a blind shot, and gets it. It's just so smarmy. I'm like, oh, Bond, come on, you don't need to be that much in your face.
No, I'm all about it. I didn't like cocky Bond that much in there, but there's sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. I think the fact that Largo is the way he is, where he's got look at my island and I've got sharks and here's my eye patch, I'm super evil, to have someone kind of come up to him and just make him look a bit silly. I think because of Largo, it works really well of Bond being a little bit more childish and boyish, I guess, and silly, or just kind of, again, trying to poke the bear against someone who's so I'm number 2 in Spectre, and he's just making him look dumb. I thought it was great. I think their dynamic, it's not the strongest one for sure, but Bond being Bond against him is a really solid part of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I say that. I think deep down I actually do like it. I kind of he's delightfully annoying. It's just he goes so far, and it's you almost have to appreciate it with what he's doing. I think after that bit, I'm struck. This is the thing. There's so many bits in this film that my memory just completely goes out. Because is it now where he goes and sees Domino again?
Yeah. So basically, Domino is there at Largo's house because Domino is Largo's mistress, and Largo invites Bond to go take Domino out later. I don't know why. I'm assuming it's just to distract him and things like that. So if he's out with Domino, then he can't be investigating the missiles and things like that. So yeah, that happens. And then it cuts to the Spectre woman, Volpe, I think, right, has actually broken into... Hold on, let me get this right. So it goes back to Bond's hotel room, and the Spectre woman is there.
Yeah.
And then... Oh, my notes don't make sense.
A lot of this film doesn't make sense.
Okay, I've got it. All right, I've got it. So we cut to basically the Volpe goes to seduce Bond. While that is happening, Paula, everyone's favourite, gets kidnapped by a load of men.
Paula, no.
Yeah, so there, like you say, this all goes very quickly. I think that's... No, that can't be right. No, I've written this down wrong. So the seduction doesn't happen here. This is purely just, I think... Volpe is going with some men to kidnap Paula, and I think that's all that happens.
Okay.
There's a lot of Spectre agents going into hotel rooms in this film.
It's always the same 2 hotel rooms because they're right next to each other.
Yeah. So Paula gets kidnapped. But ignore everything we said. Paula gets kidnapped.
Okay.
And then this cuts to a big parade, which, looking at Wikipedia, it says it's called a Junkanoo celebration.
Oh, that's right. Junkanoo. I was trying to think of what they called it earlier. Junkanoo, right.
Yeah, and at this point, I actually had to look up where this was taking place, which I know sounds silly considering how I praised the theming of this film and this location. But I was like, oh, Bahamas. Okay, cool.
Oh, right, yeah.
I knew it was like a tropical island or something, but the name, I missed it, so I had to kind of look it up. But we get this big parade, this big celebration, and when we get Bond in his suit with Domino, and then Felix signals to Bond that something is up to not exactly, and Bond then goes down and Bond tells Felix, hey, hang out with Domino for a bit, and Felix tells Bond that Paula, not Paula, has been kidnapped.
Poor Paula. I just looked up because I thought I recognised at first. I thought Paula was the annoying photographer from Doctor No.
Oh God, no!
But
not
no,
Paula.
No, not Paula. But she was one of the women who was in the cat fight in From Russia with Love. There you go. Yeah. So Paula. So Bond goes back to find Paula.
Yes, after a very quick scene of him ordering a power cut for that island.
Oh right, there's a power cut as well. Oh, there's so many bits in this film. This bit does move quick. This is where he then has to break into Largo's place.
Yes,
because that's where Paula's been taken. Okay, I'm on the level now. I think. So yeah, we get Bond doing a little bit more kind of operative spying, trying to sneak around Largo's place. I think he takes out one of the guards and breaks in to Largo's place, and eventually finds where Paul is kept. Is it now when the power is cut and then Largo says, oh, go turn on the backup generators?
Yeah, so after Bond has broken in, the lights come back on, which we hear Largo say, turn on the backup generators. So yeah, everything then comes back.
Right. And what is it that causes... So the room that Paul is in, what is it that causes them to leave?
What do you mean, leave?
So Bond can go in and see her. Do they just walk out, or are they just done?
I think they're just done because they find her dead.
Right.
They find her dead and say, oh, it's cyanide. So basically Paula has had cyanide on her and she killed herself. So she didn't reveal anything. Then I think those two people then leave, probably to report it, I would assume. And then Bond can see that Paula has been killed. And then the guards find the knocked out guard who's waking up, who I thought Bond killed him, but apparently just knocked him out. And this sounds the alarm, which then triggers the shootout of Bond between the guards.
I was trying to remember if Bond did anything to distract the two guards in the room, or if they just left on their own accord. Okay, so they just left, and that let Bond have a chance to go and see Paula dead. I was a little bit, when I first saw this bit, I was like, oh, that's sad. Paula, no, sort of thing.
Not Paula.
Not Paula. And I was like, oh, that's a bit annoying that they didn't. Basically, Bond didn't seem very, very sad. But then I thought about it some more. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Why am I sad? I don't even know who this character is. She's barely been in the film. So then I was like, actually, I'll give the film a break. I mean, it's just it is what it is. I thought at one point there could be the potential for a bit more. But no, actually, I think it's completely fair that Bond just looks and is like, oh, that's a shame. And then he gets on with the mission.
Yeah, there's no point with how this film is structured for him to linger on that. But I think what makes it sad is that you just see her dead in the chair. And then they just explain, cyanide. And that's kind of just like, oh, snap. Wow, okay. Like, that sucks for anyone. Even Paula, that would suck for.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fact that you see her dead in the chair. And you get a very brief explanation. But it's like, oh, wow, okay. All right.
Yeah, the explanation of it being cyanide, I think, makes it more impactful than if they had just ended up killing her. So it gives a little bit more to the character actually sacrificing themselves to save Squealing.
Good old Paula.
Good old Paula, may she rest in peace.
So then the rest of this scene... So I don't have too much to say about kind of this scene in general, or up to this point, because it is just Bond sneaking, which is always very enjoyable to see, but the fact that it all wraps up very quickly, it's just like, he went to go save Paula, and now she's dead, and now he just kind of has to leave. And then even kind of the shootout is very kind of basic. I don't quite get what happens here, where Bond starts shooting, And then Largo says, "Stop shooting. He's making you shoot at each other."
Yeah.
What was that about?
I guess Bond is just moving a lot and then shooting from different angles, and then I guess just expecting them to blindly shoot in one direction and hit the others.
Yeah.
It's not really the cleanest thing, but yeah, you can kind of see what he's trying to do, maybe, or maybe he should just try and leave. But no.
Yeah. So then eventually Bond is being chased down by the guards. He ends up wrestling with one of the guards, as he does, and they both fall into a pool. And Largo and the rest of the guards kind of get there, and he basically activates this metal shutter over the top, which locks them inside the pool so they can't get out. Which then leads to Bond stabbing a guard as part of the fight, and then Largo goes and lets the sharks in. And when I was saying how I like the sharks, this is probably the best scene with them in, especially knowing that Sean Connery did get into a pool with sharks.
Yeah.
And this is quite, there's some movie magic, but overall this is quite real. And in this scene in particular, seeing the sharks enter the pool and seeing James Bond basically get behind the hatch where the sharks come out, have the hatch open, and then have a shark just calmly swim by him. I was like, that's a pretty cool shot. Like, these are pretty imposing in this scene.
Yeah, there's a story about how they filmed this and using plexiglass to divide Sean Connery from the sharks, and how at one point it went a bit wrong and like the sharks got out slightly. And that's all well and good. I gotta be honest, maybe I wasn't paying attention too much, but I didn't notice any kind of obvious. It's not like the tarantula thing from Doctor No where you could see the glass pressed against the skin of Sean Connery. I couldn't actually see much that would give it away in this film.
I did notice it, and that's one. I think it's when the second shark goes by, Sean Connery is putting his hand up, and it quite obviously looks like it's being pressed up against something.
Oh, that's a shame.
So he's like has his hand in a way like a mime would, like when you're pretending there's a wall there, he kind of has it up like that, and it does make it kind of look like he's probably touching the plexiglass in that spot.
Oh, movie magic ruined. I just completely missed that part. I might have been writing a note down. Oh well, maybe that was for the best.
Yeah, it still works really well. I still kind of like it. And it's not the only shark. And the fact that Bond has to swim down the same passage the sharks came down, it's really effective because you're like, well, surely there's more sharks. We've seen there's a lot of sharks. So another shark's going to show up. So even without much violence or anything like that, just having these sharks swim by and ignore Bond to go for the guard, I really liked it. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. Why Largo has the shoot from one pool into the other I mean, I guess it's for situations exactly like this. I don't know how often he gets guards in one pool that he needs to attack with sharks, or maybe it's just like extra room for the sharks to swim.
It might be to clean the pools, because I've had fish, and sometimes you would just have to take the fish out, clean their area, and then put them back in. So you would have to transfer them. So I would assume it's that.
Oh, he cares about his sharks, Largo. That's nice.
Well, he makes someone else does it, but yeah,
he makes sure they're well fed. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So after that, we then have Bond going back to the hotel room, and now this is the scene where I can't remember her name again. Spectre woman.
Volpe.
Is there. Yeah, Volpe. Sounds like a Pokemon, but whatever. She's in there having a bath, and this is actually, I forgot about this moment. But as much of a creep Bond can be, this is one of these creepy moments I actually found quite funny, where she's in a bath and she's supposed to be all like, oh, James, so, she's doing a bit of acting. And she asks James Bond, would you mind giving me something to put on? So he picks up her shoes, gives it to her, and then just sits down calmly.
Yeah, this is always kind of shown in, if it was like a montage or something. This is quite a popular clip to use for good reason, and I don't think this has any sort of creepiness to it for me, because for starters, she broke into his hotel room, so already well, it's her fault. She shouldn't have been there. But it's quite just it's just so cheesy. It's like such a cheesy little joke. It's such a gag, but done so well that I really like this, and I think it's remembered quite fondly because of that.
Yeah, it's one of the best jokes, I would say, coming from Sean Connery's James
Definitely.
Bond.
Yeah.
And this leads to them sleeping together, because of course it does, but it's kind of a thing where she's doing it to distract Bond and probably eventually kill him, which is where this goes, I think. Then he's doing it because, well, it's James Bond. But something I did notice about this scene, and it happens in quite a few other shots, where there's a lot of low angle shots in this film, where the camera is pointed quite low or placed quite low and then pointed upwards. And I don't quite know why. I'm assuming it's just a stylistic choice. But this is why I didn't think that this, or you could have told me Terrence Young didn't direct this and I would have believed you, because there was no shots like that in either of his other two films. But this film has such a different sense with that because of these shots, and most of them are indoors in this hotel, and we get another one here where it's low, it's placed down, pointing upwards, and it just gives these hotel scenes a little bit of a different feel, where the camera was actually quite high in the first two ones that Terrence Young did. A small point, but one that I definitely noticed.
Do you think it's a good thing or not?
I don't know. It's just a stylistic choice. I mean, it gives it a different feel to the other ones, but I couldn't really say one's better than the other. It does make it feel a little bit more kind of dynamic and interesting to look at than those other films. But those first two films have a charm in how basic they are sometimes. So it's like apples and oranges, really.
Yeah, I would agree. This is the scene after they slept together. I'm going to say one of the standout parts for me. I think that's a little bit over-egging it. It's not that great, but it's something. And I remember, this is one of the things I remembered from the film liking before watching it again this time. So after they sleep together, Bond and Volpe are about to go out to the Junkaroo, and oh no, there's more bad guys at the door. And this is where Volpe turns and kind of reveals that they both knew they were bad, but now it's just sort of come to light. And what I really like about this scene, although if you actually think about it too much, I don't quite know the logic, but Volpe saying about how Bond, they slept together, and Bond's, it was for king and country, there was no meaning to it, purely for work sort of thing. And Volpe sort of, I don't know where she's getting this from, but it's very much a comment on the Bond template and the Bond girl, which is, she says, oh, Bond, your ego, sleeps with a woman, and I can't remember the quote she says exactly, but basically that Bond would sleep with a bad woman, and she repents and hears heavenly angels and repents and returns to the side of virtue, sort of thing. And this is clearly a comment on a character like Pussy Galore, where that exact thing happened off screen for most of it in Goldfinger. And I like that the Bond series is a little bit introspective like that, where it can kind of call out what I think was not dealt with very well in Goldfinger. And the point being that Volpe is not like that. Bond can sleep with her, but she's still bad. She's not gonna switch sides. That's great. How does she, if this is referring to Pussy Galore or just other characters Bond's done that with, how does she know that? I guess Spectre has eyes everywhere is the easy way to explain it.
I think so. That's how I would just take it. That Spectre just knows everything about Bond at this point. So it knows that had happened. But From Russia with Love wasn't really like that, because Spectre had someone pretending to fall in love with him, and that was her character. So yeah, you're right, in the film series it hadn't happened. But yeah, I agree. It's interesting that sometimes the Bond franchise can be so pointing the finger at itself, which I think it needs to do occasionally from time to time. But it can point its finger at itself and then still kind of do it in the same film. We still had the masseuse scene, which wasn't great. But I guess that scene needed to happen to make this line make sense. But yeah, it's a little bit odd, but I agree with you. It's appreciated that there's some sort of awareness that Bond can sometimes just bed women, and women can just fall over him in a way that doesn't really make sense or is overly realistic. So yeah, it's nice to have it pointed out, even if it's a small throwaway line.
Yeah, I think it helps make Volpe quite a good character in the end. I think definitely some stranger moments in the film with her, but overall, as a sort of subversion to previous women in the Bond films. We still have Domino, but as another Bond girl, if you could describe her as a Bond girl, one that does not follow a pattern, so to speak. So, yeah, I like Volpe. I think it's quite good. I like this whole scene actually, where she's just kind of berating Bond and putting him in his place, so to speak.
Yeah. So we then get these scenes where it's a loud parade is going on, as we've already said, and it's actually showing you the parade on and off throughout these kind of scenes as it's all playing out. So we get a little bit more of the parade, and then the guards and Volpe escort him out and escorts him into a car. So I guess they weren't trying to kill him. I think they just wanted to capture him. I think that's how I take it. And some guy goes up to the car and says, buy this, buy this, buy this. And they're like, no, go away. It's like, no, buy it though. And Bond sees a bottle of wine in the man's hand, so kicks it over and then sets it alight, although I don't remember how.
I think it just so happened that Volpe was lighting a cigarette at the very same second. So
well, there you go. Of course it's a cigarette.
Yeah, it just works.
Yeah, so then he sets them all ablast a little bit, doesn't really do any damage to them, but it gives him a chance to escape. And very interestingly, they shoot at Bond and hit him. And the bullet goes into his ankle, and the rest of the scene is Bond limping through this parade with them chasing him, and the henchmen are using the blood that's coming from his ankle to the floor, and I actually really like this scene for a couple of reasons. The first is that the contrast between the chase and the loud parade is great. Like the loud parade and how in your face it is really adds a ton of tension to it, because it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of unpleasant, to be honest, because of just how loud it is. But when you contrast that to this chase scene and then all this noise, it just really builds it up. I thought it was a really clever use. But to see Bond limping like this, it's very different, and he definitely feels very on the back foot on it, and it's kind of like, okay, well, how is he going to get out of this one? But like more so than most other scenes you kind of see. So I really liked it. I thought this was a really great set piece.
It really reminded me of a scene from Moonraker, and if someone had asked me to describe a Bond film with a scene like this, with a big loud parade and kind of something going on quite malicious in the background, but juxtaposed with really happy event, I would have said Moonraker. Again, it's another thing that I completely forgot was in this film, and I was really pleased to see it, because I totally agree. I loved the shots and the camera work. It's just almost drunk. It's kind of swaying on all of these loud costumes and parades and floats, and then you get Bond, as you say, limping, which might be a first. Great scene. Loved it.
So eventually he hides in a float for a little bit, and then he gets out of one of the floats and escapes through the crowd, and he's still limping off, and he arrives at the Kiss Kiss Club, where he goes to the bathroom, he washes his ankle, he wraps his wound, and I think that's the last we ever hear of him being shot in the ankle.
It doesn't last long.
Yeah, he gets over that pretty quick.
Yeah.
So he then, this is kind of funny, he then grabs a random woman to the dance floor and she's all like, oh, you're very bold. And then they start dancing. But then Spectre woman or Volpe finds her or finds them, and she's like, oh, I didn't know you were married. And she was great. For the 2 lines that woman had, very much enjoyed her.
Get her in the next one.
Yeah, I think she should be the new Felix. I think
if she's still alive.
Hopefully.
Sorry, that's a bit of a downer.
Yeah, not everyone's Paula, mate.
Sorry.
Still got Paula on the mind, this guy.
I know.
So basically, because they're in the middle of this club and they don't want to cause a commotion, Bond and Volpe start dancing in the middle. No, it's not slow dancing, is it? I think it's not very active dancing, because Sean Connery can't do that, probably.
He's also just been shot as well, so he's just sort of generally swaying.
Yeah, a bit of a sway. But he's been surrounded by henchmen, so there's a lot of henchmen around, and they just start kind of dancing for a little bit, going with the flow, not causing a commotion. And it gets a bit silly here, where you have a drummer as part of this club, and he's just going nuts on those things. Very exciting to see.
He loves them drums.
Apparently, right? And behind the drummer, you have these curtains and a hand and a gun pokes out from behind the curtains and is aiming to shoot at Bond. And it's another way that it was quite clever. The drummer gets faster and faster, and there are lots more cuts and things like that. And the idea is that this gun is going to shoot, but you don't know when. But the tension is being built because of all these cuts and all this drumming, and it's going crazy until eventually the gun does go off. But it's another smart little thing. It's just building it up to the point where that gun does fire. So it's another thumbs up. It's another thumbs up from me.
It's just a good use of music to go along with what we're seeing in the scene. It's just it's simple stuff, but you put something fast and hectic audio wise and you match it with this tense situation, and that just does enough. Although I do have a question about this whole scene where the gun's coming out the curtain and it eventually does shoot, but it doesn't shoot Bond. No, he manages to turn around just in time, and it shoots Volpe in the back instead, and he sort of covers it with his fingers. How is there an explanation for how he knew where the shot was from and when it was going to happen?
If there was one, I didn't see it.
I don't know whether it was just meant to be he just turned and it was just so happened to be the right time. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to see something that wasn't there. Maybe there was no explanation. He just did it.
Yeah, I think it is one of those. Bond's a pretty cool guy. So he manages to time his spin when he thinks the gun's going to go off, because he's just a pretty cool guy like that. So it's fine.
Right. Should have known, really. One thing I will quickly say, though, about that. So Volpe gets shot and she dies. Has a great line. Bond putting her down on the table. Says something like, oh, this is my friend. Look after my friend. She's just dead. This is great delivery, that line. Great line. I love that. It kind of makes up for when I was a bit confused by how he managed to do that. But it's like, yeah, okay, great. Then, as you say, there was a lot of henchmen surrounding that Kiss Kiss Club. They all just sort of see that and think, oh no, Volpe's dead. We better go. we better leave. I don't know why. Yeah, why do they just suddenly not care? That was a bit strange.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming it's because, we just shot our boss. Let's just go. Oops.
Oopsie. There'll soon be shark food, I guess.
Yeah.
Anything to get Bond out of that situation. So after that, we go back very, very briefly to M. I think it's just I like how they keep going back to London. And keeping on, because one thing that I'd argue they don't do it great on Bond's side, but they do it well on the London side, is about the time pressure of this mission. Spectre has given a very specific deadline for when they want the diamonds, and so you get these shots back in London of them, try working out getting the diamonds, and okay, now this is going to be the meeting point where we have to drop off the diamonds somewhere in, can't remember where it was now. But you get just more of that, and you get more of M kind of looking worried, but still having faith, still defending Bond, still saying he'll do it, even with all the government people and the Home Secretary. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to pay them, sort of thing. I like that they kept the spotlight a little bit on the London scenes. I argue that the whole time-sensitive nature it's not really very well executed in the Bahamas, because I think, although they do say, X amount of hours left until we need to do it, doesn't really ever seem like Bond's in a rush. I don't know.
No, I didn't get that sense either.
No, not really. But then you get, this is the scene with Bond. Oh, wait, I skipped a huge bit in my notes because Bond has to find the plane.
Yeah, this next scene, I guess I'll cover this one. Felix and Bond are back on the helicopter trying to find the plane again underwater. And Bond sees a load of sharks. And he's just like, sharks. And then he's like, let's go down there and take a look. And Felix is like, why? And Bond's like, there's sharks. And once they go down there, they see something down there. Although Bond uses like a bucket as a telescope, which they don't explain. I don't think Q ever said, now listen here, 007, you'll need this bucket. If you're going to look on this, so I guess it might be a standard thing that people have.
I
But it
think
just
it's
looks in the
probably a real
bucket
thing.
and it zooms in.
Yeah, I think it's probably real. I don't know what you'd call it. A sea bucket.
Zoom bucket. Yeah,
They're
shark
clever.
bucket.
Badly, what would you call that editing? Yeah, like cut out scene stuck on the bucket, but it's fine.
Yeah. And then we get a little bit of an odd one. So basically, Bond needs to go down and take a look at the plane, which, he goes down, finds the plane, and it's like, okay, this is the one. But because of all the sharks, in order to allow Bond to go down, Bond's like, shoot a shark. And Felix like, no worries. And just gets his gun out and just shoots a shark. And I'm pretty sure you just see it, right? Like, you just see a shark get shot.
Yeah. Yeah, if not now, you definitely do later on. You just because I thought, hang on, that was very realistic, and then it's like, oh, actually, that probably was real.
Yeah, but it's all very casual here. It's just like, bang, there's the shark dead, and then you just see this shark just like twitch with the thing and actually move. You don't see it get eaten or anything, but you see it move.
Yeah, you see blood, definitely.
Yeah. And then that allows Bond to dive down. He finds the dead clone of the pilot. And he takes I put pendant because I couldn't see what it is, but we eventually find out he takes his watch, I think. Or is that
His
Bond's watch?
No, it's his watch. He's watching his dog tags, I think.
Yeah. Takes those and then swims back to Felix.
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna complain about this because I think it's kind of similar to the book where it's just they're looking for the plane and then they find the plane. There doesn't have to be a reason for why they find it. It just does seem sort of like they're searching. Oh, there it is. I don't know. So a bit funny about that. It's, oh, well done us. But yeah, I think it's just the same as they just find the plane. They just do what they did. It's sometimes you expect a bit more, but actually that is just it.
Yeah, it's just they needed time. Like they just needed to find something that was suspicious, and they just spend a ton of time, and they eventually find it. But of course, all these cuts make it you don't get a good sense they spent that long out there. But they probably did, really.
Oh yeah, I'm sure Felix was getting very tired. That's probably why he liked shooting the shark.
Yeah, he's probably shot like 20 of them before this point, so that's why he doesn't care.
He's a monster. So now we get onto the bit that I jumped way ahead because I jumped to Bond and Domino on the beach, which is the scene afterwards. Because with him collecting the dog tags and the watch and realizing, oh, right, okay, yeah, that's the guy. He goes to see Domino and tell her the news about her brother. And I guess in the process, get her on his side and get her to help in spying for him on the Disco Volante. So this scene is quite an interesting scene to me. And it's a very little thing, but yeah. So Bond is there with Domino and shows her what he found and explains what's happened and says how she can help them with the Geiger counter camera when she's back on the ship. All meanwhile, they're being spied on by one of the Largo's henchmen. One of the things that if you kind of want this to be. It's there, but only if you kind of want it to be, and I don't know if you picked up on this or what your thoughts are on this, but when Bond is handing over the dog tags and the watch to Domino, there's a shot, kind of a close-up shot of their hands passing it over. You kind of see Bond's hand kind of tremble and shake as it comes back. And then straight after that, he puts on the sunglasses. And I did wonder, why is it kind of random? Why is he putting on sunglasses right now? And there's definitely, I've seen discussions online about it. Did he put on the sunglasses because he is getting emotional at this? Is there actually an attachment there to Domino? Does he care about her? Is he finding this difficult to do? I don't know. This is what I mean by it's one of those things where it probably isn't there in reality, but you could read it like that. And I kind of like that idea of Bond being a little bit more emotional. I mean, I say emotional, it's a very tiny thing, but otherwise the character is very kind of stoic when it comes to death, which is fine. but sometimes it is nice to get little bits like this. But I don't know. It's down to personal preference, I think.
I missed this entirely, but I kind of agree that would make sense, especially because she gets so emotional, right? Like, so he's there, and also before this scene, you see them both underwater, and they go behind some rocks, and then a load of bubbles come up, and it's implied that they made love underwater, I guess, because or James Bond's all like, "I hope we didn't frighten the fish."
Yeah,
and then that leads to this scene. So by this point, they have now slept together, so they're kind of, more in a relationship type thing. But the thing that's really nice about this is that there is a bit more of a connection there, despite Bond doing a lot of different things in this film. They have had multiple scenes where they've talked and chat and kind of hung out, and like I said, they have a chemistry. So it would make sense to me that Bond might get a little bit emotional because there has been that kind of connection there somewhat. It's not the strongest connection we see in this franchise, but I think they do a solid enough job of showing it. So yeah, I completely missed that with the sunglasses, but I think it would work if you did want to interpret it that way.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is the interpretation of it. And you're right. I think there's been some nice moments between him and Domino, particularly based around Largo being her guardian, and you get those lines about Bond asking, "Do you fear me?" I think that's maybe what he says at one point, and her saying, "No, you're not the same sort of man as he is." And so there is definitely more of an effort to make them just have a relationship at all. So yeah, I quite like this scene if you read it like that, and then it ends with a good little gag with the henchman guy who was spying on them, gets the harpoon. Is it harpoon?
Yeah, it's one of those harpoon guns.
What gets one of those harpoon guns, and you get another nice little Bond pun of I think he got the point. So good stuff.
Yeah, it's a basic one, but
Yeah,
I mean, it has been
on the
set up.
nose.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose. It has been set up because he does it super quick, basically, but that has been foreshadowed by him doing the same thing with the clay pigeons on the island.
Yeah.
He basically does the exact same move where he doesn't aim, he just spins his hand, fires, and gets the shot perfect, and that kills him. So in that moment, it's like, that's a bit weird. That's really quick, but we have seen that before. So it's a nice little small scene, very minor, but that moment is quite cool. I liked it.
Yeah, definitely.
And this all ends with Domino agreeing to basically help Bond. I think she agrees at this point, right? Or at least implied that she's very angry at Largo and wants to do something to stop him.
Yeah.
And as part of that, she tells Bond that, hey, there's this canal with some steps nearby. Largo doesn't let anyone near it, so maybe you should go and check it out. And it cuts to Bond going by the steps, and he finds some scuba gear. He then swallows the tracker tablet that Q gave him before, and then this cuts to basically Largo and a load of the henchmen all getting into the scuba gear that Bond has found, with Bond watching. He puts on some scuba gear, and then he basically joins them underwater and enters the boat from underneath. And so we've got this setup with Largo and everyone with Bond at the same time, and he's now gone undercover to try and find the missiles with them.
Yeah, so the missiles were taken to, well, it turns out it's just a big fake rock or something like that. It's a big rock that has doors on it, and so the doors open, and they collect the missiles from in there. And this is the scene that I was referencing earlier, where it just seems like it was made to use the tracker. But thinking about it more, there might be other reasons. But basically, they get the atomic missiles or atomic bombs from this underwater rock thing, and start to load it up onto the what would you call that? The big orange.
I put sub, but it's not really
Yeah.
a submarine, isn't it? It's just something that goes forward in the water.
Yeah, I'll go call it a sub. They load them onto that, and it's kind of now where there is Largo, isn't it? In there.
Yeah,
with
it's
them.
Largo. You can see his white hair.
That's the thing. Like, I always think Largo looks really cool as a character, the eye patch, and he looks really kind of calm and collected and imposing. And then you just see all his hair floating around, and it kind of it just doesn't look as cool. Looks like Boris Johnson. But
Oh no.
yeah, Largo spots that it's Bond behind the mask, and So like, a tussle kind of breaks out. Say tussle, but underwater tussle, whatever that is. Very slow one. And eventually Bond just gets trapped in the rock place. And this is the thing that I was a little bit kind of unsure of at first, because I just thought, well, why does he need to be stuck only to use the tracker and basically get Felix's attention through the tracker, and then using... That was another gadget that we forgot earlier, was the flare gun.
Yeah, okay.
And using the flare gun. I wondered what was the point of that. But I guess if you want to think about it, it's so that the bad guys had time to get away. Really?
Yeah, they just needed the missiles, so they just... Yeah, so most of them went to go and get the missiles and one guy left behind. But yeah, I think you're right. They're just trying to delay Bond, because if they try to go against Bond, I guess potentially Bond might win that. But yeah, they just run. They were like, we got the missiles, let's go.
Yeah, and then now they need something where it's logical that they are now really far in advanced. And they, their plan is like going way ahead. Otherwise, Bond would just be right behind him again, and it'd just be kind of weird. So yeah, Bond ends up trapped. He ends up trapped and needing to use those gadgets. Felix comes and gets him using the tracker and the flare gun as attention, and hoists him up on that kind of air hoist thing. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a helicopter that drops down a rope with a circle thing on it, and Bond just gets hooked up onto that and gets pulled up all nice and lovely.
Yeah, and I think it's at this point where Bond's overheard. I can't remember how he knows about Miami being one of the target destinations.
I don't know either, but he did spend a decent amount of time on the boat dressed up as the guard, so I would assume it was sometime then.
Yeah, so he tells Felix to inform, the Miami, I don't know, Coast Guard. And they get on kind of... I sigh because now we're getting onto the scene that I really don't like. The big fight scene of Largo and the Spectre henchman versus, I guess, like the CIA and stuff. But I don't like this bit.
Well, there's another set of scenes before that.
Is there? I just jumped straight to the boring fight scenes.
So while Bond is being rescued, we get a couple of scenes where basically Largo has made it back to the boat. So Domino has decided that she will, help track the boat, so they now know where it is. But Largo spots her with the tracker and then ties her up and is asking, what does Bond know? And then basically threatens her with hot and cold things, basically, as torture. Saying, if you know the right place to apply something hot and something cold, that's a bad time. So she gets tortured a little bit, because basically Largo at this point thinks Bond is dead as well. It's like, I put him in a cave, taken care of, he ain't coming to save you.
Little does he know. I think it's meant to be, I don't know, the whole ice thing, the ice and the cigar or cigarette, whatever he's got, is the hot and cold. I guess it's kind of cool. I don't know. I think it kind of does lack a little bit of a punch to it for being torture, effectively. But yeah, I guess it works. It works good enough.
Yeah, I just like Largo being kind of a character you care about with Domino, and Largo being back and just kind of being a villain, like just doing villain stuff. Like, it works. I like it. It's nice that she was trying to help up, is now being tortured. Like, that sucks, and you kind of feel that a little bit more. So, it's all just part of the whole Bond needs to stop the villain and save the girl. It just kind of ticks that box with this scene.
Yeah, definitely.
So then this cuts to basically, we have a scene where Miami has been informed that there's going to be an attack through divers coming through with the missiles. So we get these planes going across, and then everyone jumps out of the plane, all these guys in red gear, I believe. And then we have these two sets of people with harpoon guns. The ones in black are the Spectre ones with the missiles trying to get to Miami, and the one in reds are the Americans. And then it's a big old fight. And I'm going to go against you on this one, Joe.
Oh, no.
I really like this scene.
What?
Especially the first half. I was like, this is so cool. I was really into it. Because I'm just a sucker for these type of scenes in Bond films where it's two big, well, not armies, but like two groups of people just kind of fighting each other, and Bond just getting in the middle of it and kind of doing its thing. And an underwater version of it, I know most people might sigh, including yourself, but I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's a different variation of it. I liked it. And seeing all the harpoon guns get fired off and people getting skewered and things like that. The random shots of like turtles is a little bit weird, and octopuses, but whatever, it's fine. It kind of grounds it a bit. But especially for the first half, when it's the first meeting of them, I was really into it. I was like, yes, this is a bit of fun, something a bit different, and it's that cliche that I like of these two forces fighting each other in a Bond film.
Oh dear. What you say about two sides in a big battle fighting each other, I also like those scenes. I think to the laser, as silly as it is, like the laser scene in Moonraker and the end of The Spy Who Loved Me is actually quite similar as well. There's loads of them. And yeah, they're great. They're great when you just have chaos, basically. But I think because this is underwater, you just lose so much with feedback in terms of a fight. So it's why I liked the previous underwater bit where it was just Bond spying. And I do like bits of this where it is not necessarily harpoon gun and cutting oxygen pipes, because that seems to be most of it, really. But I like the bits where it's using the grenades in the wreck, or anything that's not kind of direct combat, because you don't really get any sound. You get sort of general bubbling and that sort of thing. You don't get any kind of nice sound with it. And just the nature of being underwater is it's just slow, right? It's just a slow thing. They'll be grappling with each other, but it will be very kind of weightless. And I don't know. I'm just not a fan of these scenes. They just don't work for me. It's meant to be chaotic, but when they have these wide shots of it, to me, it just looks stupid. It looks so silly. Just all these characters slowly sort of fumbling in the water. There's no drama for me. But do you love it, Tom? I love that you love it.
I like it.
Your ice cream. Enjoy it.
I was completely out of ice cream at this point as well, so that's the thing. Maybe I don't want to say it's a Marmite situation. I don't think these are a Marmite sort of thing where you either love them or hate them, but if you're not into it, then you're really not going to be into it because of how much there is in this film. Like, there's no like, oh, it's kind of cool, because even if you think it's okay, 10 minutes of it, you're going to be like, I'm so like, okay, fine. Like, nice. Okay, there's an octopus, harpoon, cut the oxygen. What, like, you are going, there's a lot, and you're not going to just think it's okay after a little bit. But if you are into it, like I would say I was, there's a lot of it, and I feel like it's a ton of fun. Like you say, it's nice to see Bond. So Bond comes in later and just jetpacks basically into the middle of it, and then just starts helping everyone out. And I like the visual language they use here, where you got all the red guys and you got the guys in the black suits, and then Bond, they deliberately have him look different. Like, they take away his jetpack or his oxygen tanks and stuff, so it's Bond. And I think that's nice. Like, I think there was some small kind of smart decisions here. And to me, this was just kind of a ton of fun. Could it be shorter? Yeah, absolutely. But I can appreciate how unique and different this is compared to other Bond films, and a different take on this dynamic. And the fact that it ties into the theming of the Bahamas and stuff, and this is the big payoff of it. I was just having fun watching it. I don't know what I could say.
It was long. It was long. And the reason why I remembered it was so long is because another thing that didn't work for me in this scene is the music. I do comment on how I like the music, and the music has been getting better and better. This is an exception to that. To me, this music really didn't help. It didn't accentuate the good parts of what this could have had. If anything, it just kind of showed how repetitive it ended up being. It was, to me, very kind of plodding along, this music. And I remember saying exactly the same thing when we heard it live at the Royal Albert Hall for the Bond concert. They played the song that, or the score that is in this scene, and it goes on for about is it like between 10 and 13, maybe not 13 minutes, but it's long, like 8 minutes maybe. it's long, and to me it's very repetitive, and it just didn't work with this scene.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting though because this is a remix of a song from Russia with Love, where that song played during the gypsy camp scene, I believe, and we got a different version of it. But the gypsy camp scene was very quick. It was a very chaotic scene like this one, but it was a very short scene where it was just like it went from 0 to 10, stayed at 10 for like a minute or two with all this chaos, and then it ended. So to have the same type of music for that scene, for this one, I do agree. Although for me, I think the remix and the changes they've made to the track, made it fit a little bit better. But I definitely see what you mean. And I think this music was originally written for a shorter scene.
Oh, yeah, that could make sense because you can kind of tell where it loops again and restarts. I think the one thing I will say as a benefit is that overall in this film, I thought there were more underwater scenes, and actually there's really there's not that, there's a few very short ones, but in terms of actual kind of extended sequences, there's probably only about two, really. This one and the Bond spying one. So there was less of this than I thought. It was just all in one big chunk that I didn't like.
Yeah, I'm reading here that apparently a quarter of the film is underwater scenes.
Wow.
So 2 hours 10. What is that, like 33 minutes, 32 and a half minutes of film?
Yeah, there was a lot of the whole setting up at the beginning with, the net. That was very long. This is very long. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I could be like you, Tom, and really like this, but I just can't.
No, fair enough. Again, like I say, like you have to be into it. And if you're not, it's going to push you towards hating it. Especially if you like sharks, because this is another scene where sharks show up, which at first I was like, that's pretty cool to, we've seen sharks a lot, and to add this element that there might be a shark attack during this big battle. But then you just see like a shark just get harpooned and die, basically. And it's just another scene of like, oh, an animal just died. That sucks.
Yeah. I did put sharks being shot, sad face. It's just not nice. It's just not nice to see.
No. But eventually, after a big brouhaha underwater, thanks to Bond, mostly, the red team beats the black team, which is excellent, and they surround him. But Largo and a couple of other people get away with, I think, one of the missiles, right?
Yeah, just one.
Get away with one of them. So Bond follows them. Now, I'm trying to remember exactly how this goes. I think they do fight underwater. I want to say Bond shoots one of the henchmen with a thing, and then Largo and Bond have a bit of a fight.
Yeah. Bond doesn't shoot Largo, weirdly. Maybe he just didn't see which one's which. And then I think there's a bit more kind of knife action, or attempted knife action.
Yeah, they have a little bit of a wrestle. It doesn't go anywhere. Eventually, Largo escapes onto his boat with the missile, but Bond is right behind them, so he hangs onto the boat. But I don't quite get where he hangs on to.
Imagine if he hung onto the wrong part and then just got minced.
Yeah, he actually gets hit by the propeller this time.
The end.
Yeah. I told him we got him. Didn't believe me. But outside of this, so basically Bond is now attached to the boat, trying to get on eventually, while Largo's trying to get away. But the US Army didn't just send some divers, they also sent some ships. So while Bond is trying to get to Largo and Largo's trying to get away, Largo is actually being chased by some US Army ships. And quite a lot of them. This gets quite intense as well with the amount of bullets and explosions that kind of go off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's multiple US Army ships there, and they just go to town on this thing. And then on the boat, you have the guys with the turrets, like, shooting back. It's like a proper shootout. It's pretty cool.
Well, you would hope that with a risk of a nuclear weapon going off, they would throw a lot at it. So, fair play. They actually did.
Well, you don't want to set off.
Well, you say that, but then later on it just explodes. So, I don't know what's going on with the physics here.
Yeah, maybe. So, yes, so they then split the boat. So, first of all, they use smoke to hide the boat. And I guess that's just to try to explain why hasn't the US Army just destroyed this boat. They've got to give it some gadgets to kind of be able to get away. So they use smoke to hide it and then detach the back half of the boat So the front half with Largo and the missile is now just a speedboat. And is just trying to basically get away from them while Bond is slowly climbing onto it.
Hell yeah. I love that bit. I think that's just cool. It's just a cool look. Like, it's really done. Like, it's actually separated as a real ship that just broke apart and then sped off. I really like that.
Yeah, it's a cool little effect. So now we have a very brief scene where throughout the film there's been this scientist man who's just been around with Largo, who hasn't really done much, but I think he's meant to be the bomb expert or something like that, because he frees Domino and then says, "I've thrown the arm keys overboard," or something. So this guy just gets a conscience and just saves the day. But it's like, who are you, though?
Well, you know why.
Why?
I mean, Volpe said it. Bond slept with him.
Wait, what? Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah. If Bond sleeps with someone, then they suddenly become good again. So that must have happened here. That's the only logical conclusion I can make.
He did it for King and Country.
For King and Country.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. I'm assuming in the book maybe it's explained a bit more. But yeah, this guy is around a lot. You just don't see him. And then just at the end, he just kind of is the one that frees her and gets rid of the arming. So you know everything's okay at that point.
Yeah, that bit is very quickly, this has gone too far. It's like, well, surely you always knew that it's probably going to explode. But good for him, though, because I think without him, would not have ended very well.
Yeah. So now we get a little bit of superhero Bond again, because Bond gets into the boat, enters the, I'm going to say cockpit, but I'm assuming it's a boat, so it probably has a better name for it.
Do you have bridges on boats that small? Is it still a bridge? I don't know. I don't think it is.
I guess we'll say the bridge for time, but
let's just say it, yeah.
He'll get onto the bridge, then there's Largo and at least two other henchmen, and Bond just goes mental on them. Something that happens in this film is that people like to throw each other around a lot, and they like to throw things, as we saw in the start of the film. And this is a lot of that. Just him just like, I'm going to get you. And Largo then just like, he chokes out Largo for a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, but still like fighting the other people while choking them out.
All whilst the boat is going very, very quickly. And
yeah, he like shoves the accelerator, so it's going super quick. Then just starts choking Largo, throws a chair. It just goes a bit mental.
Yeah, this scene is very similar to that first fight scene in the pre-title sequence. It's very weirdly cut. No flow to it at all. I think, and combined with the fact of what you're saying, where Bond somehow defeats all these guys kind of at the same time. It is superhero Bond, but also just kind of really badly done. Alongside, I think the one thing that sticks out a lot is the whole fast-forwarded footage to try and convey speed. It's just absurdly fast. It's too fast. It just doesn't match what's going on in the rest of the scene.
Yeah, I at least like it because of this a little bit of build up here. Unlike the very first scene at the start where it's just like a random scene. This is at least like, okay, sure, let's have a chaotic mental scene. Like, I don't know what the secret formula is for these Bond scenes, where some of these I like and some of them I don't like. I cannot tell you exactly why, but I did quite like this one as just like a bit of a mental ending where everything's like fast and crazy and stuff. And I don't know, I had fun.
It definitely was mental. I think that's the right word to use for that. It's just all over the place. So, yeah, basically, Bond takes out the henchman and is left with just him and Largo. And through another bit of tussling, it ends up with Bond on the floor and Largo with a gun about to shoot Bond. And then we get a big dramatic villain death, except not really, but he gets shot in the back by none other than Domino. I nearly forgot her name then. With a harpoon gun. Those harpoon guns, they got some good use out of them in this film.
Yeah, it must have been cheap.
Oh yeah, yeah. So gets shot, and I think that's when he stumbles forward onto the controls again, doesn't he?
Yeah. And then Domino says, "I'm glad I killed him." And it's just really nice to see this all come together. We've seen this with Bond girls and characters and the character developments and stuff, but this is the first one where it actually took all the elements and put it together. Is it like groundbreaking? No, but it's really nice that we knew what Domino was about. There was some sort of relationship there. We got a scene with her crying and being very upset about her brother and being tortured. So it was a really nice payoff to have her come and shoot him in the back like that. It was a great moment. And it's nice to finally see the Bond franchise kind of put that all together, because we've seen the signs. It just hasn't quite worked out. But for me, in this one, they finally figured it out.
Yeah, Domino, finally, someone has a good arc. As you say, it's not a groundbreaking arc. It's not particularly detailed or in-depth, but it doesn't need to be. She was his mistress. He killed her brother. She got revenge and killed him, and actually did it herself. So, I think by this point in the series, that's as good as it's going to get. So I'm glad that we did get it.
Yeah, and overall, I would say she's my favorite Bond girl so far.
Oh,
and it's not even close.
No,
really,
nowhere near close.
So now that the boat is going mental and they need to get off it because it's heading towards some rocks, they jump. I think the scientist or the bomb guy is like, I can't swim. Then Bond's just like, not too late to learn. Just kind of jumps and pushes him off.
Yeah, I actually thought that was the last line of the film. There is one more line where Bond says sort of like, get down, or something just very simple like that. But there's actually no more dialogue, weirdly, in the rest of the film. So we were very close to that being the last line of the film.
And I don't know what happens to him, because eventually, to skip ahead a little bit, we are right at the end. But basically, a plane comes down, a US plane, drops off this red blimp type of thing, and a raft, which is where a Bond and Domino get onto. Where does the bomb guy go?
He can't swim, so
the sharks got him, I guess.
Yeah, he's somewhere in there. He's fine, I'm sure.
Okay, all right, that's fine. And then basically they're on this little raft and this little blimp. Bond shoots it up into the sky. The plane comes back again and catches them and pulls them out of the raft, and then they're just dragged along by the plane, and then the Bond theme plays, and that's your lot.
Yeah, no little end quip or little gag or anything. That's it. I was really, I was like, oh, did I miss something? Is that really the end? I had to go back and rewind and just check that there was no little one final line by Bond. But no, it's all in silence, this last bit, in terms of dialogue.
Yeah, and that sequence of them being picked up I thought was very strange, but then I looked it up and it is a real system. I don't know why they had to do it. I guess they were just showing off at this point. Or it does seem like it's a system the CIA developed. So the fact that they're in Miami working with CIA, probably a nice reference to them. But it's a bit weird to not have Bond just make out with the Bond girl and end it. This is a little bit different.
It just needed one line just to wrap it up nicely. It's kind of another strange ending, but yeah, that was it. That was Thunderball. And I don't think this one had a James Bond Will Return.
No, I double checked that, but apparently they weren't too sure what it was going to be, which we might talk about next time. But they didn't list it at all. This is almost framed in a certain way as like the last not the last Bond film, but it's almost framed that way, really. Like it's a peak. It's the end of this kind of stretch of Bond.
Yeah. And I think that definitely is, there's something to be said about that is the case specifically for Sean Connery anyway. I think you could argue it's either this one or Goldfinger is really where he's done, he's peaked, because I think after this film he sort of started to get a bit sick of it. Yeah, and you can definitely tell, which we'll talk about in the next podcast. But yeah, this might actually kind of be that's it for Sean Connery, if you were to sort of wrap up these first 4 films on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that the film is done, I'm going to throw it over to you, because I did it last time. Where are you thinking Thunderball goes for you in the rankings?
Okay, so at the moment, just as a little reminder, when we get into later podcasts, I don't know how we're going to do this, because we're not going to start listing out 25 films, but yeah. From Russia with Love is top, Dr. No, and then Goldfinger at the moment. And I have put this, from being my second worst Bond film, it is now number 2.
Okay.
It's my second favourite Bond film out of the first 4. Mainly because I couldn't work out whether to put it above or below Dr. No. but I decided to put it above in the end because this is the film I imagined Doctor No would have been if it wasn't the first film. If Doctor No had more money and was filmed later on, it would be like this. Because we've said about how there's lots of similarities in being in one particular location and quite a, I was going to say simple plot. There's definitely some very complex things in the plot, but overall it's quite a simple plot. I think with that in mind, this film to me is just a little bit more fun. A little bit more fun. It has a little bit more of those classic Bond elements to it. We've got the Q stuff. We've got the gadgets, but not crazy gadgets. We still do have some good stunts and some good shots and everything. So it's slightly better than Doctor No for me, but not by much. Surprisingly, I wouldn't say by much. Didn't have as many bad underwater scenes as I thought it did, and I actually thought Largo was better than I remembered. I remembered him being a little bit hollow, but I actually quite liked him on this viewing. I thought he was quite a kind of calm and collected but imposing villain still. And yeah, great, good locations. I think number 2, solid at the moment.
Very good. So I generally agree with what you're saying. I think the thing for me, I was surprised at how solid and enjoyable this was. I think the word solid is the word I would use to describe this. It's a little bit long in the tooth, and there's definitely some editing they should have done here to make it a bit more tighter and things like that, and it would have really helped the film. But overall, it was just solid across the board. It's just Sean Connery does a good job. It's the best Bond girl we've seen. Like you, I would say I enjoyed Largo. I don't get why he's so criticized when, to me, I don't think this is a villain film. You know, this is Thunderball. This film's not called Mr. Largo in the same way that we had Dr. No and Goldfinger. I see this as a Spectre film where Largo is just the guy that he's going up against. So I don't think it's fair to say he's that bad of a villain when I don't think it's really what it's about. So I don't judge it too harshly. And even then, like you say, he's still pretty solid. And just across the board, it's just like fun. I think the underwater scenes are great. I love the theming and I love the location and how they use that location. I think it's really strong. And the sharks I was surprisingly into and invested. I like the ending fight, so there's that. I thought that was great. And I think I've already said it, but it's worth saying again, the best Bond girl by far, and the most little arc that has gone through. And it was just really enjoyable from start to finish, really. Again, could be cut down a little bit for sure, but even then, I still very much enjoyed it. So this one was very difficult for me to rank because I feel like each of these films have been very different in terms of how I see them. Dr. No is the rough but charming start. From Russia with Love is the more fleshed out version that doesn't have all those elements but just has so many great elements in its own right that it's kind of getting there, but it kind of works really well. Goldfinger is the mess where it has a ton of highs but too many lows for me to say it's really amazing. And then this one overall is just solid. And I think you comparing it to Dr. No is very apt, really. It's kind of like if you took the complicated nature of From Russia with Love and kind of applied the Dr. No template to it, you would kind of get this film and make it a bigger budget. I was trying to figure this out last night where I was kind of like, okay, maybe I should just compare them one-on-one. And I got a little bit stuck because I was kind of like, do I like Thunderball more than Dr. No? I would probably... Well, From Russia with Love is number 1 for me. There's no competition. Like, I don't think I enjoyed Thunderball, but From Russia with Love still number 1. It's not taking that spot. So it's like, okay, where should I put it? So it was like I could see it if I compared it to Goldfinger. In a lot of ways, I still prefer Goldfinger, but then I prefer Dr. No to Goldfinger, but then I prefer Thunderball to Dr. No. So
it's like a Mexican standoff.
Yeah, it was like a rock, paper, scissors with Bond films. So for me, I either had to put it at number 2 or number 4, because number 3 wouldn't make sense to me. If I'm going to say it's better than Goldfinger, then I also need to say it's better than Dr. No. But do I think it's better than Goldfinger? And eventually I've settled on saying yes. So I'm also putting it at number 2. Which I just enjoyed it a lot more. I think the interesting thing about this film is that when you watch it, you enjoy it. But what brings it down is that there's just no iconic moments. it just doesn't have. Dr. No has the beach scene, Honey Rider coming out. From Russia with Love has the train and all that sort of stuff. And Goldfinger has, well, the laser scene and Fort Knox and stuff. Thunderball doesn't really have that, which makes it so forgettable. But the actual film itself is really good and really solid, and I enjoy it. So I have to rank it high considering the format of what we're doing, but I do think it is not as memorable. And the reason why people forget it and it kind of gets pushed aside is because it's lacking those moments. And if it just had a couple of those, it probably would be much higher regarded. But even so, watching it now, I enjoyed it. I'm putting it at number 2.
Okay, so we've got exactly the same at the moment.
Yeah. Pointless, really, isn't
it? Kind of, yeah. Ignore these first 4. No, I think for me, as you said, I just, compared to Goldfinger, I came out of watching Goldfinger just kind of a bit annoyed. This one, it was long, but I enjoyed it. And that's just how I kind of cemented that this was definitely, better than those. The thing, what was I going to say? Hang on. Oh, that's it. The thing that I think Thunderball has at the moment, though, the risk of it, is it's going to move down quickly. It's probably going to move down very quickly when we get more Bond films on this list. As you say, in this little chunk of 4 films, it's at number 2. But because it doesn't really have those memorable moments, which I agree with, I think other ones are going to surpass it quite soon.
Yeah, we're going to have to see, because the way I currently see it for me is that I think a lot of these films these 4 are going to hold quite high for me, because I do enjoy them all. So I see potentially, and I don't know, For Russia with Love is probably going to be top 5, but for me, I could see Thunderball being top 10, and then I would see Dr. No and Goldfinger would probably still be a top 15 at the very least, maybe like 11 and 12, something like that. So for me, these 4 films I think are going to be in my top half, or more likely to all end up in my top half than my bottom half. But from the way you've described them, I think a lot of these are going to actually maybe end up in your bottom half of the list.
I don't know, actually. I actually think these might stay high-ish. I think similar to you, but I just know that there's going to be ones that I'm going to like more than Thunderball. That's not staying near the top for very long.
No, I don't see it being top 5 at all.
Yeah.
But there we go. That was Thunderball. We did it. The longest Bond film so far. And it was a pleasant surprise overall.
It was long, but it was enjoyable. So yeah, surprising. Definitely not my second worst Bond film anymore.
Well, that's good news. Yeah, you've got 2 other films you know which are worse than it, right? So it's already been promoted.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cool. So any last thoughts before we go?
Do I have any last thoughts? Did I write down anything that I didn't mention? No, I don't think I do actually. I'm glad that it's kind of out of the way, which sounds bad, but I'm now looking forward to the films that I thought I liked ahead of doing this podcast.
I guess so. For me, I think it's downhill for a good while. So I'm going to have to get that ice cream booked. If there's a subscription service for ice cream, I'm going to have to sign up to it, because this next 10 weeks I think are going to be really rough for me.
You're going to come out of this podcast with a few more pounds, maybe. You need to go to the health clinic that Bond did.
For King and Country. That's what it's for.
Just don't go on that spine stretcher.
No. So you have been listening to episode 4 of the Bond Revisited podcast. The Bond Revisited podcast will return next week for You Only Live Twice.